Good afternoon and welcome. Thank you. So I'm going to start off. First of all, give yourselves a round of applause for getting here. I know that there was a lot of problems in the airports and the storms and just the traffic and to come here to this great weather. But welcome. And let me just start off with this. If I can start off. Should I use this thing? Yes, sorry. This. Who here is from Carbondale, Illinois? There's somebody. Yes. But just two people. Who's heard of Carbondale, Illinois? No, just kidding. Who here is from, I can't even read. Who here is from Nashville? Good. All right, who can tell me what is the significance of these places? I'll give you a hint. So one thing that's going to be great this summer is this. It's the first solar eclipse that goes across the country. I didn't know this until a patient told me this like earlier this week. Goes across the country and we're going to, for the first time since 1979, a solar eclipse is going to be visible across the country in those cities. So that is one great thing that is going to happen this summer. There's another great thing that's going to happen this summer. And it's not Dr. Hoyt's love of the fidget spinner. It is the conference. So welcome to the 2017 ACS Quality and Safety Conference. This conference is going to be entitled, or is entitled, Achieving Quality, Present and Future. And what I'd like to do for the next 20 minutes or so, we started a little late, is to give you a short preview of the conference because it's going to be a little different than previously. Just as an aside, if you tweet, the Twitter is #ACS QSC for ACS Quality Safety Conference. Very easy. If you don't tweet, don't worry about that. So a lot of folks have asked, because we've said over and over again that this conference is going to be very new. So how is this conference new? So if you've been here over the last 10, 12 years, it's been really known as the NSQIP conference. And so initially we would have a conference to give back the data reports every year and then go over those. A few years later, that was in about 2006, we started doing that. A few years later, we opened up the PEDS NSQIP program, and then that was joined. And so about 8 or so years in a row, after PEDS joined, we had these annual conferences for NSQIP, and it was just known as the NSQIP conference. A few years ago, the College of Surgeons got together with ASMBS, the American Society of Metabolic and Bariatric Surgeons. We developed the Bariatric Quality Improvement Program, MBSA-QIP, and they wanted their own conference, and so we thought about it. We opened up the SSR, the Surgeon-Specific Registry. There are thousands of surgeons that participate in that, some for regulatory reasons, but a lot for quality, and they wanted their own thing. And then the Children's Verification Program opened up this year, and they wanted their own thing, and we felt that, well, why don't we just put everything together? And so that's what we did. Now, we're also developing other new programs. Another one is the Coalition for Quality in Geriatric Surgery. And so they had a pre-conference this morning, which was amazing. And they want their own conference. Strong for Surgery, the folks out of Washington, Dr. Pellegrini, Tom Varghese, Dave Flum, wants their own conference. This is a new program also that I'll talk about, and you'll hear about the rest of the conference, Improving Surgical Care and Recovery, basically enhanced recovery. You know what, they want their own conference. We opened this book up, and it's in your bag. This is why your bag weighs about 10 pounds. This bag, which I'll tell you about, we were going to start its own conference. And so basically, we're going to put all of this together today and the next few days for you in the ACS Quality and Safety Conference. You can see that this is the logo done by our very amazingly great communications division at the college, but it's going to include all of this stuff. Now, if you know the college and the college programs, and maybe at your hospital you have some things that are not on this page, and those are these two things. So the trauma programs and the cancer programs are also at the college. They are not in this conference this year. Next year, we fully intend to do that. But they do have informational tables on the second floor, and I know it's already been busy. But this together, all of this in this box is what the college does for surgical quality. So how is this conference this year new? It's going to be a lot more breadth. It's going to be a lot more depth. It's going to really help us figure out how we're going to take care of the surgical patient in a lot of different ways. So this is how the conference is new. I do want to go towards conferences and knowledge transfer and how it's changing. So we live in a millennial environment. Some of us are not millennials, but we live in a millennial environment where we have a lot of information right at our fingertips, right? We can take our phone and we can basically get all the information that we want. So conferences, why do people come to conferences, and how do we learn from each other, and how do we do that? So there are a few things that we thought were very important in terms of conferences. So number one, we need to include relevant and real-life examples. You'll see hopefully that in this conference. We need to learn at a conference, and it should be enjoyable, it should be relaxed, and it should be fun. So after today, no more ties. You can wear jeans, wear a t-shirt. It's going to be hot out, wear shorts. We want to be relaxed. The most important factor for learning in today's environment, however, is to be interactive and participatory. This is what you can't get when you're looking at your phone. This is what you can't get when you're Googling something or wikiing something. And so we wanted to make this conference very interactive and participatory. So as we designed this conference, and I'll let you know who designed it in a little bit, there are 5 things that we thought were very important. One, because we're going across the spectrum from the pediatric neonatal patients to the geriatric patients and all the different specialties in between, we wanted to have core content for everybody. So I wanted to provide some context for you, because in the general sessions is meant for the general audience. So things like, what are the quality programs of the college and what they're doing as a foundation? Hot topics of disparities and variation. Opiates is a big issue. How do we train the next generation? PROs, which stands for patient-reported outcomes. How do we evaluate experience and quality of life and satisfaction, symptoms, things like that. The next is preoperative readiness. We are finding out that that is increasingly important as we're trying to take care of our patients. The statisticians think that the world is all about statistics, and so how can you ever have enough statistics? Our reports look good, now what? That's a session that we've been asked multiple times in our surveys, that our reports, we look good. So what should we do? Should we just do nothing until the next report? What can be done? QI best practices and the all-important emotional intelligence. So these are the core general practice sessions that I think will be very interesting for everyone in the audience. Now, what we learned from Dr. Sachdeva, who's the director of our Division of Education at the college, are these programmatic tracks. As we have different people with different interests here, in addition to the core content, we have program tracks. And so in your programs, if you have the app, you can follow these things. The conference was designed so that every minute of every day in your track, you will have something that was developed and is going to be presented just for you. So you have the tracks adult NSQIP, the children's and peds NSQIP, geriatric, bariatric, and for the trainees. The breakouts is largely where this happens. And so in the breakouts, sometimes we have as many as 15, 16 different choices. And I know that when you registered, we asked you for these things so that we could get the correct room size. But for the breakouts, there's a lot of things. This is just, for example, the first session of breakouts where there are 10 or so choices, and by color are associated with the different tracks for your interests. Discussion panels. What's really prevalent in the survey responses that we get from you with the reviews is that people love the discussion. So they enjoy people talking for 15 minutes on whatever subject. But when people get up here or sit at in one of the breakout rooms and we're able to ask questions, how did you really get the surgeons and anesthesiologists to actually sit down and talk? How did you even schedule a meeting when you can have the surgeons, anesthesiologists, nurse, and pharmacists get together? How did you get the C-suite to pay for X, Y, or Z? How you can ask Patch Dellinger, how does he decrease SSI other than being naked. I saw a paper that you wrote, being naked when you operate. How can you do it other with your clothes on? These discussion panels, people find them really interesting, we can really be interactive and participatory. Finally, networking and sharing. This is a really important for this conference because part of quality improvement is really much more so than I think clinical care. Quality improvement really is helped and supported by learning from everyone else. Because, you know, how you communicate, how you lead a team, how you follow in a team, how you assemble a team, how you do things in a hierarchical fashion versus in a flat fashion, that networking and sharing of that information is key. And it doesn't have to be some world international authority on the stage telling you. It could be every single one of you who are doing it in your settings. What you learn from when you succeed, what you learn from when you don't succeed, is invaluable when you're talking to each other. So networking and sharing is clearly very important, and it was a really fundamental piece of when we put this conference together. There are many networking opportunities. There are a lot of breaks between sessions. Within sessions, there's opportunities to network. Even in the pre-conferences this morning, there was a lot of kind of collaborative learning and sharing. At the breakfast and at the lunch, we tried to have time to do that. And then social outings. Tonight, there's the welcome reception at a Gustavino's, which is just a mile from here. There are buses that are leaving. We'll make announcements later today, but there are buses leaving after all the sessions. Tomorrow, back by popular demand, and I think hopefully the SCRs and MBSCRs will like this, there's the meet and greet. It's at the Sheraton across the street, and that's tomorrow evening. And then on Sunday is the poster session. We had a record number of abstracts submitted, and actually we couldn't take all of them, unfortunately, but we have about 300 posters. We'll have a poster session on Sunday where we can ask people, how did you do that? Why did you do that? How do you get those results? Who was your team? And we can go and we can network and share. We can also eat and drink. So there is one message that I want to say that's very important. The attendees are very friendly. So this is very important for you to know, that the attendees are very friendly. This is one of the friendliest conferences that we attend. And this is important for two reasons. Number one, for networking and sharing. So please don't be shy going up to anyone and saying, how did you do that? I saw you speak up there. I see your poster. How did you do that? Don't be shy, because on the other end of the coin is that when somebody comes up to you and they say, how did you do that? I'm sure you are very happy to share with you and with somebody and say, yeah, we did this. It didn't really work, and yeah, this personality, this person really helped. It was great to do this or that. That is very important. And this really, the culture of this conference is for that, the sharing and being very friendly. The second thing is that why it's important to know that we're all very friendly is that we have, some rooms are going to be very filled. And so sometimes we're going to have every seat filled. And so if you see people waiting and there's a seat next to you open, please invite the people to come and sit next to you. We didn't realize how many people were going to come to the conference, and so there might be some rooms that are pretty filled. So thank you for being very friendly. The app. So it's very interesting that in the surveys, the number one thing that people say, well, besides the temperature of the room, is the app. People love the app, and clearly if you haven't done it, let me go back. If you haven't, you can access the internet through this code, ACSQS 2017. It should be also in your program. But beyond that, when you get the app, you can see that there's a whole bunch of things, and it's very much like last year, where you can look at your schedule and the maps and the sessions and the speakers and attendees. If you need CME or CNEs, that is available. And then the times when there's 15 things ongoing, what can you do now? That'll be on the app as well. If you press this, you can set up your own profile. And when I first opened up this page, I was a little miffed because it said you have no friends. But don't worry about that. Just put in a friend, and then that goes away. Then you get a lot of friends. You can clearly see the tracks here. And so figure out what track you like to follow, and this will help you very easily follow what are your interests. Informational tables. So as I mentioned, that there's a lot of things ongoing at the College of Surgeons for doing quality. On the second floor in the promenade, you will see this row of tables, and you can see all the things. If you want to get information on any of these things, you want to ask Mark Cohen and the surgical team, and the statistics team, anything. Member services, if you want to become a member of the college, they are there. Cancer or trauma programs, you can see the whole list of things. I think that's also in the app, this list. So please, a lot of folks say, well, they'll email in, they'll call in, you're here, they're here, just might as well meet them, because it'll be sometimes a lot easier to meet and talk to people and put a face with a name. So I want to go through some highlights. There are so many highlights, I can't go through all of them, but I want to go through some. So first of all, each quality program, NSQIP, children's, bariatric, each of the quality programs has its own things, its advances and its progress and the news, real news, things like that. But I do want to go through some things for 2017. These are things that have been developed and released all with the past 7 months in 2017. So first, the children's surgical verification. Keith Oldham and a multidisciplinary team of leaders in the pediatric surgery field put together this program over the last few years along with our staff, and this was released earlier this year, and hospitals are signing up, and we're going to start site visitings, but this is one major program that started in 2017. The bariatric folks have put together the Energy Project, and if I can remember this, ENERGY stands for Employing New Enhanced Recovery Goals for Bariatric Surgery. It's an enhanced recovery program, and it's a collaborative that will eventually include all or invite all of the bariatric, over 800 programs in the bariatric programs. Are starting off with a smaller number, but that program has started this year. NSQIP and adult and peds, and also the bariatric registry have instituted e-learning educational materials. Our clinical support team has been amazing in putting these together. So, for example, interactive decision trees or things like that to help ensure that the data rigor is even better than it already is. The data platform releases, so I talked about the surgeon-specific registry. That was the first database that we released on this new platform, and you've heard probably in past years, or if you've been to other surgical college meetings about the platform, and so I just want to very quickly mention this. There are sessions about this, but this blue circle here is the ACS registry platform that is being built. The idea is that we're going to have one platform where we will put all our databases onto that single platform. And this allows efficiencies for the hospital. So if a hospital belongs to more than one program, it's easier to get the data in and data out. And for the college, if you are, and for the users, if you are, for example, in NSQIP, and you have a patient, I'm a colon surgeon, you have a patient who has a colon operation, and that patient has a colon operation for a cancer, and there's cancer information in the cancer database. We put this all onto the same platform. Suddenly, we're able to get out, for that one patient, the NSQIP outcomes with the risk-adjusted things, and also the cancer staging and cancer treatment and the cancer outcomes of survival and all those types of things. And so this is the registry project, and this has been going on for a couple years, and it's going to take a couple more, but this is the big ACS data platform project. You can see from the green arrows, we're going to have a lot of different ways that the data go in, whether it's the EHR, whether we have to put in still some things manually. PROs is the patient-reported outcomes. We know that that's increasingly important, so there is a portal into this database, into this platform where patients can put in if you want to get what their pain assessment is at 30 and 60 days, or if you want to get their quality of life or their experience or anything like that, and that's all there. And then, of course, the gray arrows with the data out. So this is the registry platform project. I wanted to talk about that because the SSR was released, and we are constantly upgrading and improving and innovating in terms of that. The last two, number 5 is ISCR, and number 6 is the quote-unquote quality manual. The quality manual is what is in your bag. We gave one out to everyone because we finished this quality manual last month. It's been 4 years. You've heard it probably the last 4 years at the NSQIP conference, like, oh, it's next year, oh, it's next year, oh, it's next year. All right, we're done. And it's in your bag. And we even though within the college, and I call it the quality manual, it's officially called the Optimal Resources for Surgical Quality and Safety. And you will see that the chapters in it are, and this is just some of the chapters, are things that we have found and what the hundreds of authors have found, and what our 4,000 participants in at least one of our surgical programs have found are to be important. So, as an example, the phases of care. How do we look at quality in pre-op, and in the immediate pre-op setting, and in the intra-op setting, and in the post-op setting, and in the post-discharge setting? How do we look at quality across those things, individually and in the continuum? The surgical quality officer, what is a leader of quality of surgery in a facility? What is that person's job? What should the qualifications be? How much time should they put into it? What protected time should they have? The quality and safety committees, if it's not just one person doing everything, and unfortunately we sometimes see, oh yeah, you're the quality person for all of this, and that's probably not possible. But if you're going to have a bunch of committees to do that, what does that wiring diagram organizational chart look like? What kind of examples, what are the principles, what are the values of each of those, what are the missions, and how do they play together? How do you do case review? How do you get a safety culture? Reliability, credentialing, how does quality lead to credentialing and privileging? Reliability, again, I put it twice, it's so important. Policy, regulatory, performance measures, disruptive behavior. I know none of us have that or have seen that, but it does happen. How do you deal with that? And so forth. So this manual is in your book. We hope you will enjoy reading it, and it is helpful. It is really taken from collective intelligence of those hundreds of authors. You can see it's like a who's who's list, and our site visits and the expertise that we gain from all of our quality programs. The next thing on your right is the Improving Surgical Care and Recovery, what we call the ISCR. And it's basically the Enhanced Recovery Program that the college and ARC and the Hopkins Armstrong Institute are working on together. And the idea, overarching idea, and there are, again, sessions devoted to this, is that we would like to get as many hospitals as possible, in the thousands, participating, implementing, successfully using enhanced recovery principles. And we're going to start off in 5 areas, but I know that we will likely expand. And we started this program just last month. It is funded by AHRQ, the Agency for Healthcare Research and Quality, who is also, parenthetically, the agency that funded NSQIP to start at the college many years ago. And so ISCR, the Improving Surgical Care and Recovery, is going to start in colectomy, and we're signing up hospitals. So if you're in a hospital and you really feel like you'd like to sign up, I think on the second floor at the table you can start to do that. What we have found is that of the 300 hospitals or so that have signed up, a lot of them said that, oh yeah, we're already doing it, but we just want to see what's going on and maybe we can help other hospitals do it. And what we found as we've talked to them is that they say they are doing it and they say they're doing it well, but when we talk about the different components and what is doing well means, they're not really doing that well. And they admit, like, oh, we didn't know it was that. We didn't know you should do that, blah, blah, blah. So if you are doing it well, we would love you to sign up and help us help other hospitals and other folks. If you don't think you're doing it well, sign up, because then we can help or people can help. And if you haven't done it at all but you're interested and want to just learn what it is, sign up. Colectomy soon will be joint replacement in ortho, hysterectomy, bariatrics, emergency general surgery. I know we're talking about doing it in peds, in children's, and so that will happen as well. Finally, the last thing I'd like to highlight, but not least, is the keynote. The keynote speaker is Blake Haxton. By profession, Blake is a lawyer, but we still invited him. But I will have to say that Blake is a very inspirational person. You can read it in your program, but basically he had necrotizing fasciitis. He needed amputations. He was a rower before all this happened. He got himself together, and after all of this was said and done, continued rowing and was in the last Paralympics in Rio just last year. He has an amazing story. He's a very inspiring individual, and he's going to talk about resilience and failure, and that's going to be tomorrow. So please be present for that because I think you'll enjoy that a lot. Speaking of resilience, and this is the kind of the last points I want to make in this welcome, is about character strengths. And you know, talking and hearing about Blake and hearing his story and his title made me think a lot about, and we always think about this at the college with our values and that leadership is character strengths. So the idea of character strengths is that each of us have character. Each of us have strengths and character, and there are 24 different character strengths that will individualize us. So if we take our top 5 or top 7 character strengths, it's like our fingerprint. And except for, you know, some colleagues of mine who think they're strong in all 24, we actually can rank these and see which ones are really important for us. And it's very interesting when you take the survey which ones we're good at and which ones we can work on. And the idea is that when we know which ones we're good at, we can capitalize on those things to make us even better at whatever profession we're in, whatever level we're in, whatever project we're doing, whatever person we're talking to. And so these things are really important to way to think about things. The work that's been done in this is that there are 7 that are basically fundamental, so that regardless of industry you're in, regardless of what kind of career path you're on or where you are in your career path, there are 7 that are really very good to have. And so curiosity. Well, let me take a step back and say that people, as I think about people doing quality, I think that people doing quality and doing it well have these in spades. So curiosity. Why did that patient not do well? There are people like, it's an act of God, that's what happens, move on. But there are people like, I wonder why that happened. Why did we get a DVT when we did this? Why was there an SSI? Why did this take longer? Why did this patient stay, 8 days when this other one stayed 4 days? Why? Perseverance, kind of like what Blake is going to talk about. Resilience, perseverance, grit, persistence, those types of things. We can see that, and we know we have to do those things. Enthusiasm. When we go to the quality improvement meeting, it's certainly a lot better when people are enthusiastic. Social intelligence, humility, key, hope, optimism. And the last thing is gratitude, being thankful, being appreciative. That's kind of along the lines of empathy. Those things are very important. And so I want us to think about, as we're going through these next 3 or 4 days, these types of things as our own building blocks of what we're doing with our teams, in our facilities, in our hospitals, as we're trying to do quality improvement. Building on the gratitude, I do want to end by thanking and appreciating several groups. So the first is the program committee. The program committee is consisting of these 6 people. Rachel and Susan were the co-chairs leading this, but Doug and Phil and Jill and Anita were on countless number of phone calls, putting things together and the different tracks and identifying speakers and whatnot. And so I would like to ask for a round of applause for the program committee. So there are almost 300 speakers. There are moderators for each session, and clearly there are a number of experts in the room. And they, give time to give a talk, putting slides together, thinking about it, doing all this is a lot of work. And so I would really like to thank all the speakers, moderators, and all the experts and all the networking people who are going to be at this conference. I would have to say that the ACS staff has gone beyond anything imaginable to put this meeting together, because this is really, if you imagine a company with silos in it, although Dr. Hoyt is here, I don't want to say that we have silos, but we kind of have different programs, and putting everything together across the different programs has been an amazing kind of vision for all of us to see. Bariatric, children's, the NSQIP pieces within NSQIP, and all of these, there's statistics and clinical support and IT and all that, and putting all this together to give you this conference, it's really amazing. So but don't give them a round of applause yet, because other parts of the college, for example, meetings and conventions, who put all of this together and get all of the infrastructure in place and gives us all the breakout rooms and gets all the meals and makes the rooms temperature how we like it or don't like it, all of this stuff is that. And in addition, the communications folks at the college, the staff is amazing, and I do want to have them receive a round of applause from all of us for that. So one thing that I fail to mention every year, and I wrote it down probably for the last 6 years, and I'm not forgetting this year, is this, that we should really have a great appreciation for the American College of Surgeons. And so if you're a surgeon in the room, like, yeah, whatever. And if you're not a surgeon in the room, you're like, yeah, whatever. The American College of Surgeons, and I'm going to stand on my soapbox here. I'll stand on this chair. No, just kidding. It has been an organization for over 100 years, and is the largest of the surgical organizations, professional organizations in the world. And it started with surgeons getting together to figure out how to give good surgery, how to have good, safe, reliable surgery 100 years ago. And people got together to share their technique, tried to share their results, tried to share, what a hospital should have in terms of doing safe surgery from the days of Codman, from the days of the Mayo brothers, from all of that to now. And it's really one of the main missions of the American College of Surgeons, to the point that you saw that huge slide of all of the programs that the colleges have developed. And if you think about a lot of the other kind of professional organizations that do not have that, and it's the reason that the college has that is it is in the main mission, and it is the piece that the leadership of the college really supports and allows us to build NSQIP and to build different pieces of NSQIP, or get the Bariatric program going, or the children's program going, or a program in geriatrics. And it's really due to the American College of Surgeons' kind of belief as an organization, and also the leadership. And I do want to commend and show appreciation to Dr. Hoyt. And Dr. Hoyt is for surgeons you know, and for the non-surgeons you might not know, Dr. Hoyt is our CEO, Executive Director. And he is the one who, and he's been in that position for the last 8 years, he is the one who I see weekly and call and talk to almost daily these programs. And he is such a strong advocate of this. He, as you know, is a trauma surgeon and grew up in the trauma program. And in fact, in his last job, he wouldn't take the job unless he had NSQIP, bariatric, trauma, and cancer at the hospital. So he fully believes it. He lived it when he was the chair of surgery, and now he supports us. And so I would really like to everyone give Dr. Hoyt a round of applause. And if it sounds like I'm sucking up to him, I kind of am, because he looks at our budget. So if you see Dr. Hoyt, just thank him, hug him, shake his hand. I would really appreciate that. The last, not least, the gratitude goes really to the attendees. You all, every single day, help us, help everyone take care of the patient better. And that's really what it's all about. I sat in some pre-conferences this morning when people were talking about relatives or friends who had surgery, or they themselves had surgery. And that's why we do this every single day. We have, I think, in doing quality, safety, reliability, all that stuff, I think, amongst everything available, we have the purest mission. It's very easy when you think about why. It's so easy to answer that why question. And so really I want to thank and show my appreciation for all of you for attending this conference, but more so than that, for what you guys do every single day for the surgical patient. So maybe one more round of applause for everyone here, because that is really amazing. So welcome to New York, welcome to the ACS Quality and Safety Conference. As always, staff are always around, so if there's anything that you need, please let us know. If there are suggestions that you have for next year's conference or later on in this conference, please let us know. And have a great time, network, share us your insights, and have a great, safe time. So thank you. So next, every year, we have these sessions where people welcome us to their city. And so we've asked Celia and Reba to come in. They work here and live here in New York, and they're going to tell us all the great things about New York City. So please welcome Celia and Reba.
Thank you, Cliff. He's so good. He's like a rock star, isn't he? Anyway, I'm Celia Divino.
And I'm Reba Miller.
Welcome to New York. A flyover of New York City never ceases to excite all of us. However, when Cliff asked us to make this presentation, Reba and I decided to share with you a view of the city from the ground and in the light of its history, its institutional frontrunners, and how they've paved the way for the current healthcare in New York City today. And somehow, while we're doing this, we'll show you what to do and where to go in New York. So the first slide really shows that the formalized healthcare in New York City has a long and rich history with about 400 different hospitals that have existed in New York City to date. Like much of New York history, there are three major influences on how healthcare has developed, and that's money, immigration, and of course, real estate. Anybody in New York knows that real estate is key. By 1660, an infirmary serving the Dutch East India Company became the first healthcare facility, and by the 1700s, New York was really a bustling port with a nascent medical community with medical students mostly in an apprenticeship role. Students actually resorted to robbing graves by night and dissecting the corpses to study anatomy. Fortunately, this practice came under scrutiny when children playing near a medical school saw a body hanging from a second-floor window. So really, this, where's the clicker? So the city, this one? The city protested in what is now the infamous doctors' riots. They protested against medical students and their professors, and this incident really clouded a New Yorker's view of doctors for many years to come, as they came to associate doctors with morbidity and mortality rather than healing. So prominent figures like John Jay and Alexander Hamilton worked with the military, as there were riots going on uptown and downtown, to quell the riots. Hamilton's life is very well chronicled in perhaps one of the biggest, most popular, sold-out Broadway shows in history. Considering that it's virtually impossible to get tickets to Hamilton, it may be worth checking out Hamilton Grange, that's where Hamilton lived, and maybe even Trinity Church downtown where he's buried. There are two beautiful parks also in the vicinity. Bryant Park on 42nd, this is actually Washington Square Park in West Village, and Bryant Park, which is across, very close to the New York City Public Library. The New York City Public Library is sort of the home of the lion statues, patience, and fortitude. It's interesting to note that this modern-day oasis were actually potter's fields that were robbed by the very students who incited the doctors' riots. This is the main hall of the New York City Public Library, which is really fantastic and, quite impressive and worth seeing. And this is all in the general vicinity here of Midtown. You're right here right now, and all within walking distance.
So New York has always been a destination for immigrants. Between 1810 and 1860, the population grows from a little over 100,000 to almost 1 million people, which is about a 10-fold increase in just 50 years. Immigrants came from all over. They are representing different races, practicing different religions, speaking different languages. So there's some of the newcomers that did not make it past Ellis Island Hospital, where they either died or they were turned back for symptoms of typhoid or yellow fever. This was the age of bloodletting and bile in the 1800s. There was a lack of sanitation, and things like miasmas were thought to cause disease. And healthcare in those days consisted mostly of private paid house calls for the wealthy, as well as sort of home remedies and midwives for those who couldn't afford it. For both groups, hospitals were really something that was feared, and so they were considered a last resort. It was also considered back then a moral imperative for the privileged to take care of those less fortunate, and so this sort of gave rise to a dispensary system, which was subsidized by wealthy New Yorkers, which was sort of a hybrid apothecary and outpatient clinic, and they would provide a written referral for anyone who they saw fit to receive medical treatment there. So if you're wondering why I put Edgar Allan Poe's cottage on this slide, I'll let you know. He actually lived, obviously, in the days before the HIPAA laws, and we have public records from the Northern Dispensary uptown, which showed Edgar Allan Poe being referred for and treated for a head cold in 1836. He was living in the Bronx at this time, and he had a little cottage uptown, and you can actually go see the cottage is still standing there today. The Tenement Museum on Manhattan's Lower East Side, which is not all that far, it's a quick train ride away. You can take a guided tour and hear stories of immigrant life from around 1863. And you can also take a ferry to see both the Statue of Liberty and Ellis Island, obviously prominent places in New York City's immigration history. There's many cruise lines that pass by these islands, but they are, there's only one cruise line, which is Statue Cruises, that will actually take you to the islands where you can go up the Statue of Liberty or actually take a hard hat tour of Ellis Island.
By the mid-1800s, half of the New York City population was foreign-born, and crowding in low-income neighborhoods was a problem. It was very prevalent. The notorious five-point slum, immortalized in the movie Gangs of New York, became so famous that people from out of town came and went there for tours. People like Abraham Lincoln, David Crockett, and Charles Dickens went there and tried to advocate for the people living in the tenements. Typhoid epidemics and cholera outbreaks would go unnoticed because victims came from the same addresses within the slums. William Bryan and Joseph Pulitzer actually advocated and publicized all these conditions, and public shaming brought some changes. Fresh air became a commodity, and hospitals vied for riverfront property. I show here the floating hospital because the floating hospital became the prototype of a waterfront hospital that were treating patients as they were traveling up and down the East River. As you know, New Yorkers still put a premium on fresh air and water views. If you look, right here on the west side is the High Line. The High Line is a popular park that one should not miss. It's built on an old industrial railroad track. You can enjoy walking, and it's a breezy walking path with beautiful gardens and actually public art. Further north, that's going uptown, is Washington Heights, where you will find the Oysters Museum, which is sort of an outpost of the Metropolitan Museum of Art. It was built in 1934 from bits and pieces of French abbeys, and it sits in Fort Tryon, and it has a fantastic collection of medieval art. Across the water, across the East River, is Long Island City. Specifically the Long Island City Landing in Queens. It's right across the riverfront from the UN headquarters. It's very easy to reach. You can catch a ferry directly to it. You can enjoy the river, from the waterfront, and perhaps visit one of the microbreweries within walking distance of the park. Still in that General area, you can visit the Greenbelt hiking trails of Staten Island. It's set in the hills of, La Tourette Park. There you can also see the old mansion still there. You also can see the ruins of the old Seaview Hospital, which was a tuberculosis sanatorium set high on a hilltop. There's also an old smallpox hospital there with spectacular views of Manhattan. Go ahead.
So New York City has always been at the forefront of innovation. There's been a lot of different firsts that happened here. One of the first was the first nursing school, the first professional nursing school in North America was opened here, as well as the first ambulance service after the Civil War. There was a horse-drawn ambulance service, which was the first ambulance use off of the battlefield. Can we get this screen turned back on?
You can see it there.
Okay. Sorry.
You have that.
Okay. So there was a lot of innovation going on in New York City. We also had the first forensic science lab here. This was a partnership that was done with the Office of the Medical Examiner, which was sort of created after World War I, and the NYPD. They sort of tracked things such as bullet trajectories and poisonings, drownings, things like that, which led not only to increases in patient care, but also improvements in the criminal justice system as well. One of the other things that sort of made a debut here was baby incubators. It made a debut at Coney Island, where people could pay to see often premature babies in incubators for just a few cents a piece. So Coney Island is still a popular tourist destination today. There's a lot of things to do out there. You can go to the Wonder Wheel and the Cyclone, and it's obviously popular on hot summer days such as today. You can also visit the Tenement Museum while in Brooklyn. In downtown Brooklyn, you can see there's different histories of not only public transport, but also the change from the automobiles from horse-drawn days. If you want a more old-fashioned, you can take a walk across the Brooklyn Bridge, which is right there in downtown Brooklyn, which will take you across to City Hall Park in downtown Manhattan. And there's a lot of things to do around here. The mayor's office is right down in City Hall Park, as well as Tweed Courthouse. And the African Burial Ground Monument is right there at the foot of the Brooklyn Bridge as well. And uptown, you can go to the Museum of the City of New York, which gives you a little bit more of a comprehensive history of New York City.
So non-municipal hospitals proliferated in the 1800s, mostly defined by the population they served. Physicians and surgeons, now Columbia Presbyterian, accepted wealthy Protestants, patients who were not chronically ill. Columbus Hospital catered to the Italians. St. Luke's Episcopalian, and Mount Sinai was the hospital for the Jews. But out of necessity, around the time of the Civil War, hospitals began opening their doors to changing patient demographics. The German hospital employed only German-speaking staff. That's the Deutsche Hospital, and changed its name later on to Lenox Hill. It's funny because nobody now remembers its German roots, but everybody knows that that's where Beyonce gave birth to Blue Ivy. St. Vincent was so Catholic that women were turned away from nursing positions for being too pretty. And it became the epicenter of the AIDS epidemic in the 1980s. St. Vincent closed its doors many years, but when its epitaph was written, it was noted that this hospital treated victims from the Titanic, victims from the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire, victims from the AIDS epidemic, as well as 9/11. Quite impressive. The floating hospital, whose last ship served Lower Manhattan until the attacks on the nearby World Trade Center in 2001, has been reincarnated somewhat disappointingly on dry land in Queens. But that is New York for you. Things change. Immigrants and entrepreneurs come from all over to make a name for themselves and with new ideas, opening new restaurants. And speaking of restaurants, there are a lot of restaurants in New York. I mean, I am going to speak to it in terms of just the type of food. If you want Italian food, you can go from uptown to downtown. You have very good Italian food on Arthur Avenue that's very close to the Bronx Zoo. Or you can go all the way to Bensonhurst, where a very robust Italian community lives. And of course, if you want to stay local, there's Little Italy in Manhattan. And across the street is Mott Street. And guess what? When you cross it, that's already Chinatown. And that's the beginning of Chinatown, which spans both sides of the canal. Great Chinese food. If you want to go to Queens, there's Flushing, which is a home to a variety of really Chinese, Korean, Vietnamese, Filipino cuisine just off the 7 train of the subway. Astoria in Queens is an old Greek neighborhood, and you can take the N train to get there. It's great for gyros and spinacoppitis. And of course, Greenpoint is an area in Brooklyn that is a combination of old school Polish restaurants and new hipster joints. Brighton Beach is right here at the tip of Brooklyn. It's down Coney Island Boardwalk, has fantastic Russian restaurants on the water. And of course, Jackson Heights, also a part of Queens, has, name it, you have Tibetan, Nepalese, Bangladesh. I mean, right, across the street from South and Central American food on adjacent blocks. So we are currently in Midtown on the west side. You have a lot of restaurants to go to, but really, I think I encourage everybody to explore. It's one ride away, one subway away. They may not be Zagat rated, but they are fantastic and probably more authentic than what you will find around here. Reba?
So there really are just so many things that you can do in New York City. I wholeheartedly recommend exploring a little bit further afield. If you can get to the outer reaches of Manhattan and to the outer boroughs, I mean, it's just a whole different world. I mean, it's worth it to get a subway ride to Brooklyn and up to the Bronx just to see a different side of the city if you get the chance. I'd also like to shout out my team, Danielle and Richetta, Rich and Jessica. They do a fantastic job of keeping the quality program at Mount Sinai running, and if you see them around the conference, I'm sure they'll be very happy to point you in the right direction and tell you different things to do.
They're very friendly. Well, I mean, people ask, what's the best way to get around New York? I mean, there's the subway. It's perhaps the most extensive subway system in the world. It's far-reaching to all the boroughs. Is it safe? Absolutely. It depends, obviously, on what time of the day or where you're going. There are different kinds of cabs. There are hansom cabs. There are petty cabs. There are regular cabs. There's Uber. You could get to any of these points. I'm sure there's a concierge service by the hotels that will help you. But there's nothing that can replace, I think, exploring New York walking. I didn't see a picture of Central Park here, but it is really for any New Yorker, that is the true oasis and center of where we go to escape everything, the heat, the dust, and the noise. So that is definitely worth half a day to walk the trails, to participate and watch all the cultural events. It's going to be very hot, but still it's well worth it. Most importantly, really stay safe and enjoy New York. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Great. Well, the next session, we're going to get right into the next session. The next session is the ACS Quality Programs, and we thought that starting off the conference, it'd be good just to have a foundational understanding of some of our major programs. And so the first program is going to be ACS NISQIP, and the speaker for this is not going to be me. The speaker for this is going to be somebody who is probably one of the smartest and nicest and most person who would have those 24 character strengths. Bruce Hall has been with the program for as long as it has existed. He is fundamental to so many parts of it, and there's probably no one better to speak about ACS NSQIP than Bruce Hall. So please welcome Bruce up to speak about ACS NSQIP.
Thank you, Cliff. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you. Cliff was very kind. Usually only my mother is that nice to me. It's an incredible honor to stand here with all of you this afternoon. This is my 17th straight summer meeting for NSQIP, so I was taking part in these before we called them that, and I'm glad to say that to welcome all of you to our first annual Quality and Safety Conference now. It's a real honor to be here with you. Cliff asked me to just speak a little bit about some of the highlights for the adult program. He's already mentioned several, and my job is really just to give you some teasers on some additional ones, really to make you think about other sessions that you might want to take part in while you're here in the next couple of days. I make no secret about the fact that I'm an advocate for this program and for the College of Surgeons, and so if you wish to take everything I say with a grain of salt, please do so. I couldn't believe more wholeheartedly in the program that I'm staring at in all of you here. So by the numbers, I'm very proud to say that the NSQIP program now involves almost 700 adult hospitals. We're just one or two short, so if you've got any friends nearby. We've also got 101 on the pediatric side, so we're at 799. We just need that one more hospital. Dr. Hoyt has promised they'll get a special prize, which he's keeping secret. We're now spread across 11 countries. We have a variety of unique modules, which you're probably familiar with, more than 50 collaboratives across the country, really accomplishing amazing change. The participant use data file, the PUF, has really become the stalwart resource for all of us in this arm of our profession, and also for our trainees, for the young researchers for our profession, who are really learning their chops and at the same time driving change on behalf of all of us, on behalf of our patients. If you just PubMed NSQIP, you'll get more than 1,500 references in the flash of a second. That's an amazing thing. And based on the work of this program, we've always, for the past 5-10 years, had a very strong relationship with the National Quality Forum. And we have several measures endorsed through the National Quality Forum and continue to develop that relationship. For nearly a century, the American College of Surgeons has played this critical role of driving improvement for our profession and our communities of patients. And as you heard Cliff mention, Dr. Hoyt has been one of the visionary leaders in these efforts over time and continues to be for all of us. We're lucky to have his vision. The college has always said we believe in 4 core principles of setting standards, building infrastructure, collecting data, and then verifying what's happening with those people who know, with those experts. If you're a fan of high reliability principles, deference to expertise is one of the keys. How we've operationalized that in NSQIP over the years is that we seek high quality care. So we collect data, we do our best, most sophisticated analyses, we feed back information and plan actions, and then we figure out what works and what hasn't worked, and therefore what we can promulgate as best practice tools, guidelines, and standards. I'll start by highlighting a little bit of the right-hand side of this slide, and then I'll move to the left-hand side of this slide and hopefully not go over my time. This program has told hundreds of hospitals over the years just how we're doing, and we accomplish that by following outcomes or end results, in the words of Codman. We use clinical data because we think that it's worth the investment, thanks to all of you. We use clear, rigorous definitions, trained data collectors who know their stuff. That's you, again. We use a horizon that is 30 days, fixed across programs, which really differentiates us from almost every other data platform in the world. And we do risk adjustment. And really, we were leaders in the field of risk adjustment, even though risk adjustment has become de facto across healthcare. So we rigorously collect and analyze these data, and if you do read the opening comments in your SAR from Cliff for this meeting, you'll note that we're now accruing about 1 million cases a year into this database. What a resource, what an incredible, unparalleled resource. We feed back surgical outcomes to all of our institutions. You know some of the traditional models, but we're feeding back 500 plus models now. And you may say that's too many, you may say that's too much. In some ways it could be. So I'll make a remark in just a second about how we're trying to help make sense of all that information. We validate our data in several ways, and I'm very proud to say that we've always stood tall on the fact that our data are reliable. We know that they're never perfect, and we know that there's always work to do. But we've studied in the past, and we've shown that over time, as we gain experience, our data become more and more reliable. And we hang our hats on that, but we know there's much more work to be done. We also know that taking that reliable data and making sense of it requires rigorous, sophisticated risk adjustment. And if you've followed the literature over the past 15 years, you know, again, the actors in the NSQIP have been leading the way on promulgating highly sophisticated modeling for our profession on behalf of our patients. Nowadays, our reports look like this, our standard bar chart for odds ratios. In the past, we used to play with this forest plot, which a lot of people still are attached to. This plot very easily let hospitals know who was doing well, who looked like they might have problems to flag. And that blue line going across the chart, that's not to be ignored. Those are national benchmarks that are really important to all of us, whether you're on the good end of the spectrum or the end of the spectrum where you've got things to fix, whether you're in the middle. This program has established that blue line for, as I said, maybe 500 or more models over time, and that's information we didn't used to have. So we've studied how our hospitals do over time, and we do well. We do better. We get better. None of us think that NSQIP is the only thing driving improvement. We know that. We know that it's a very complex environment of improvement activities, but at least we're part of that environment. And what I will say is, no matter how we look at this, we get reinforcement of the notion that we're all doing better over time, and I think that's key. We don't hang our hat on one study, on one metric. We look at this in every way we can, and we get the same message over and over again. So we know that hospitals can make use of this information and drive change, not just in metrics, but in culture. And this is one of my favorite examples from Royal Inland, some of our Canadian colleagues. I hope they're here with us today, showing not only some activities they did in response to data, but the end result of their data clearly getting better over time. But perhaps even more importantly is this quote from Dr. Wallace, and I'm going to read it to you because I think it's a powerful quote. NSQIP has profoundly affected my approach to my work. I now see what I do surgically as only a small part of what helps my patients through their journey. I am now more aware of the processes of care that need to be in place for optimal patient outcomes. While you could not ask for a better endorsement, I don't know if Dr. Wallace happens to be here, but thank you for that endorsement for the work that we do. And you know, there are new realms, new avenues that we need to pursue, and value is one. You'll hear many talks during this conference about value, about resource utilization. It's an area that as a profession we maybe haven't paid enough attention to. And so we're looking now in new ways. And this example is one where we saw that just looking at hospitals that are doing better than expected, hospitals that are doing a great clinical job, you see that half of them are doing it efficiently and half of them are doing it a little less efficiently. And that's not stuff we can ignore anymore. We've got to figure that piece of the equation out as well. So along with this meeting, we're releasing the 8th volume of NSQIP case studies. I'm very happy to make that announcement. If anyone's new to this endeavor, 8 volumes of case studies means there's 40 or 50 examples of projects out there that these hospitals have done and succeeded at. So really, there's no excuse for not knowing where to start. Just pull out these case studies and start reading and say, hey, that one sounds like fun. This is an amazing resource, best practice case studies. You heard Cliff mention the Strong for Surgery program is coming at us now. This is going to be a key piece of our readiness for surgery for our patients, and Dr. Hoyt's going to talk in more detail about this, but I wanted to mention it because it's also a key piece of us driving change at the political level, at the government level. You'll hear Frank Opelka talk about some of that challenge and how us thinking about the whole spectrum of care for our patients is the wave of the future, even on the political front. So the Strong for Surgery program will be focusing initially on nutrition, smoking cessation, medication use, and glycemic control, and you'll be hearing much more about that. You all know we've had the surgical risk calculator for a while now. We continue to believe in the utility of using a tool like this to have conversations with patients. We're not saying that this tool is the only and best calculator of everything that might happen to your patients. What we're saying is use this tool to sit down with patients and families, tell them what we think could happen, tell them how we want to optimize them, how we want to bring resources to bear on their behalf, and make sure they have reasonable expectations for what might transpire. We've seen programs across the country. Here's a manuscript out of the VA using the calculator to really drive care. And for those in the PEDS program, the PEDS surgical calculator exists now. And again, fantastic resource for all those reasons I just mentioned. So a last few coming attractions. You heard Cliff already mention patient-reported outcomes. This is a topic I love, and fortunately we've got some amazing experts in Drs. Temple, Pusick, Liu, driving some of these conversations for us on this front. And again, if this sounds interesting, attend their session. But I love the notion that maybe for the first time in our history of our profession, we're actually turning to the patients to saying, are we good? Have we met your expectations? Can you walk? Of course we know the surgery was a success. Was it a success for you? We have not done enough of this in the past, and now we're re-emphasizing that aspect of our relationship. So I love this work, and I look forward to that work. We've taken on a unique HPB hepatobiliary trial in conjunction with the AHPBA, being coordinated by Dr. D'Angelica at Memorial Sloan Kettering and Jason Liu from the college. Henry Pitt was a good thought leader in this effort as well. And this is really, I would say, a type of pragmatic trial that we've never done before. But if we could be successful at this, it'll be a mechanism we can really use to drive our profession forward. We have a whole new program opening up. I think Cliff mentioned the Transcript program. Transcript is now in the beta phase. Dr. Rossi's here to talk about that during his session. If you're interested in that, that will be yet another tool in that toolbox that Cliff beautifully showed. And a minute ago, I mentioned that we're now providing 500 models. So how do we make sense of 500 models? We in the college need to do better at helping you sort through the signal and the noise. And this, I think, is a great example put together by Dr. Cohen and our analytics team of unique ways to portray information that may help you focus on where the action is. So this is kind of a heat map of surgical site infections. This is a hypothetical example, by the way, but it shows you in one glance across all our models where we see a signal popping up on this axis of infection. And so it can really help focus your efforts on where the improvement is needed the most. I'm going to close with educational modules. This is one of the things that Cliff already bragged about. And this has been put together by Jake Lapsley and the whole educational squad inside of the college. So this is not Bruce taking credit for any of this. But we're embarking on really an entirely new philosophy of education in conjunction with you. Instead of little discrete pieces of information, we really want to move toward an ecosystem, a philosophy where everything links to everything else. We're going to do this by starting with prioritizing online content. We're going to have new e-learning modules that are going to be lower burden, easier to internalize, easier to follow and make sense of. They're going to be more engaging, more interactive, and they're going to be scenario-based whenever they can be. We're also, as Cliff mentioned, doubling down on decision tree applications. We've dabbled on decision trees a little bit in the past for a couple of variables, but we really believe that some more aggressive application of decision trees could help all of our SCR squads do their work more easily. And so we really want to focus on getting through very complex variables and very complex decisions one step at a time. This not only helps every single SCR be more efficient in their daily work, but it also, again, makes our data more robust nationwide when we can guarantee that everyone made that call on that variable in the same way. We're developing more responsive online resources. This is, again, a piece out of the Strong for Surgery program. You'll hear much more about that, but you'll be able to access this information not just at your desktop, but on your laptop, on your tablet, on your phone. And one of the biggest pieces, and I think this deserves a huge shout out to the teams working on this again, is our new online operations manual. So this will roll out first on the adult side. The previous PDF manual has been somewhat hard for folks to work with at times. In this new online version, it'll be much more searchable, it'll be bookmarkable, you'll be able to note on it, and then every time you access it, you'll be able to give us feedback on whether you were able to get the information you needed, whether that page worked, whether that trail worked, so that we'll have a constant stream of feedback as to what needs our attention for improvement and to be made better. This is that example of that feedback that we'll get when you tell us whether you were able to find what you needed. And in line with all those educational efforts I mentioned, we're going to be asking many of you to join the beta team. And by that we mean we're going to be putting resources out there for your input, your feedback on constantly. And we're going to want as many of you as possible to sign up to be part of that beta effort. We want this to be more and more crowdsourced every single day, not to put ourselves out of a job, but to make sure that your voices and your expertise are what are reflected in this program. So I will stop there. We'll have many more conversations around each of these things. But again, as I look out here across this room, everything about this program and everything about that whole portfolio that Cliff showed you is due to the effort and the passion of everybody I see sitting out there. So kudos to you. Thank you very much for making this program a success.
Thank you. No, you don't have to. Thank you, Bruce. Our next speaker to get moving on is Douglas Barnhart. He's professor of surgery at the University of Utah. He helps us in so many different ways with the children's programs, and he's going to tell you a lot about what the children's programs are. So here's Doug.
Good afternoon. I get the opportunity to share what a lot of people have done with the children's program over the last year, and most of this work represents other people's jobs and other people's work. First of all, what I want to share with you and convince you is that this is relevant to all of you. Some of you are my colleagues from children's hospitals, and we of course recognize that the most important patients are the children because it's the longest term outcomes that anyone can present. But others of you are from general hospitals where you do provide care to children. Many are parents or grandparents, and since Cliff has assured us that everyone's friendly, everyone at least likes children. And the big message I wanted you to go home with is that there's great work right now going on at the college to make surgical care for children better in North America. And hopefully in the next brief period of time, I'll be able to share multiple exciting things that are going on in the college that are leading to that better care. I want to take a brief moment to give a shout out to all the people that do an incredible amount of work that make this happen. First of all, the college staff. This has been a year of rapid change with the development of the Children's Surgery Verification Program and its deployment. That involves herding cats of getting a bunch of busy surgeons to get things in on time, and they've done that graciously and nobly. There's an incredible number of surgeons that volunteer their time to allow this program to go forward, and they really bring their expertise to bear both on the Children's Surgery Verification Program but also on the NSQIP Pediatric Program. Without that content expertise, we wouldn't be able to go forward. And as we all know, all of our quality programs are based upon having reliable data, and that rests completely on the reliability of our endurance of our surgical clinical reviewers. And in particular, the pediatric program has rapidly evolved because of our surgical clinical reviewers' willingness to pilot variables for us, give us feedback so that we can rapidly move our program forward. So I just would like to particularly acknowledge the SCRs, and just if we can pause just a moment to give them a round of applause. I'm excited to say that this is really the year where we're not only going to talk about pediatric NSQIP, but talk about the children's surgery programs in the ACS, which includes both the NSQIP pediatrics as well as the children's surgery verification program. And what I'd like to do is talk about each of those in turn, and they do relate to each other, but present them separately. First of all, it's been a continued year of growth for the children's NSQIP program. This, as you can see from this graph, it's grown every year, and today with this SAR, we've crossed the threshold of 100,000 cases enrolled in 1 year and more than 100 centers. So it's continued growth, and we anticipate that this is going to continue to even grow more as we go through children's surgery verification. We are, not only by our patient population, but by program, we're the younger sibling of the adult NSQIP program. And like younger siblings, you start out imitating most of what your older sibling does. And if you look at our program, most of the structure that Bruce discussed applies directly to the NSQIP pediatric program, including how data is handled, how SCRs are trained, and so forth. But as you grow as a child, you realize that there are some differences between you and your siblings, and sometimes that's painful for both of you to realize. But we've realized that, and when you discover those differences, you make changes. And I just highlight here a few of the differences between the pediatrics program and the adult program, and issues that we've worked through in a relatively rapid fashion with the help of our SCRs. First is, from the very beginning, we were broadly multi-specialty, and it was our goal to provide a measure of quality not just in general and thoracic surgery, but for all surgical specialties in every children's hospital. So that it was not an opt-in or opt-out for everyone. They provided multi-specialty. The nature of our specialty is there's a wide, diverse case mix, which also means that there's relatively low volumes of particular cases. We treat a wide range of rare anomalies. Pleasantly, and what draws many of us to pediatric surgery is children have lower morbidity and mortality than adults, which is good in terms of clinical care. It makes it more challenging if you're trying to do quality improvement and identify areas for improvement. And then finally, because of the rarity of our cases, the procedure-specific risks are relatively poorly characterized in the literature. As a result, the program came up with a number of strategies to try to quickly move to providing high-value data to centers that would provide actionable items. The first and most obvious thing we did was, and this continues to be an ongoing year-by-year project, to enrich the case sample for procedures that are more prone to complications. And this, as a result, again, makes it more challenging for SCRs because we keep bringing in sicker and sicker patients into our sample and eliminating the healthy ones with simple procedures. Another strategy that we used was to add in procedure-specific risk factors and outcomes. And we did this in a way where it emphasized each specialty bringing in a specific type of case that had unique risk factors and unique outcomes that would be meaningful to that specialty. And these were selected based on the fact that they were those that were associated with an overall high morbidity burden, which we calculated by the incidence of complications or occurrences, as well as the frequency of the operation nationally. And then finally, in that, when we brought those procedures in, we also added process measures to look at efficiency of care and as an important measure of quality. With this, we asked each of the specialties that's involved in NSQIP pediatrics to select a type of case to bring in, and there's specialty advisory councils in each of the specialties that worked on this, and these are simply the list of what they're doing, and we're pleased that these are progressing and that we're now getting procedure-specific data back, which is interesting and actionable. This is the brand new Spinal Fusion project. This is the first year that there's data out on spinal fusions nationally in children. And as you can see, we're still relatively low numbers and our error bars are wide, but even with that, just at a quick glance, you can tell that there's ways that hospitals can improve. You have hospitals that almost never use the ICU for spinal fusions and other hospitals that always do. It's an immediate setup for a way that you begin a collaborative work to improve the utilization and make it appropriate for ICU care. We see similar things in our other diseases such as appendicitis. Again, in this complicated appendicitis, it began with very high rates of central line placement in some centers, with other centers having none. And what we're pleased to see in appendicitis, because we've now been doing this for several years, that as we have our conference and present and share these ideas, we've moved to where there are now less and less outliers, and people have completely eliminated some of these expensive resources that they were routinely using that others were not. And the most interesting is then we can actually get with these to balance measures where you really start to define centers that are performing very well, and they're the ones that we want to learn from. This is just an example of one of those slides where we look at CT utilization versus negative appendectomy rate. Obviously, you want to get into that lower quadrant where you're not using CT and you're still having a low negative appendectomy rate. As Bruce mentioned, we do have a risk calculator. We encourage you to use it. I think early on, one of the easy ways to use it is actually with your colleagues in medical specialties that may not appreciate the real morbidity and risks that are associated with some of our procedures and some of our high-risk patients like neonates. Again, this is on the website. You don't even need to remember the website. Just Google Pediatric Surgery Risk Calculator with ACS, and the first hit will bring you up to that. Finally, we've rolled out on the data side one other new project this year that's currently being piloted, and this is our bridge into the verification program. One of the roles of Pediatric NSQIP is to serve as the data source for the verification project, and one of the challenges that the verification program faced was how do we measure whether or not a center really has 24-hour availability of surgeons, radiologists, and immediate access to the operating room. And in that, the data committee came up with the idea that we could simply isolate a few selected cases that are time sensitive, that require both a diagnostic study and immediate operation, and collect data on how quickly the hospital is able to respond to that. And we're currently in the phase of doing this with a pilot study, and we believe that this will actually provide immediate feedback for centers to identify areas for improvement, and whether it's in the emergency department, diagnostic imaging, or in OR resources. Which bridges us into the Children's Surgery Verification Program, which is an exciting change of what's happened in children's surgery this year. This project began in 2012 when Dr. Oldham first pulled together a task force that was multidisciplinary to begin to look at defining optimal resources for children. And those of us that care for children all have had times where we subsequently take care of a child that was treated in a way where everyone would recognize they didn't have all of the resources that were needed to bring to bear to provide the best care for the child. And so we began with this simple vision that every child in need of surgical care in North America today will receive care and environment with resources appropriate to his or her individual need. And then subsequently we've recognized our more global commitment, and further this will become a model for applicable care elsewhere. As a result of that, there were 4 separate task force meetings that resulted in the creation of standards, and these define not only the scope of practice for centers, but the optimal resources that that center should have. The resources are broad and include not only physician and allied personnel such as nursing and respiratory therapy and pharmacy, but also the equipment, the measurement of quality using NSQIP Pediatrics and other safety data, as well as having a robust performance improvement program. This is similar to the trauma program, and that creates levels of care, and as you can see, there are 3 levels of care, and really defined not only by the scope of practice, but by the resources necessary. The key concept underlying the stratification of centers is that the level of the Children's Surgery Center defines the scope of practice and level of care, not safety or quality. We truly believe that the difference between centers is what they do, not how well they do it. We completed a pilot program this year in 2016 in which 6 separate sites underwent site visits. During that, we were able to test the operational definitions of the standards, refine the agenda for the site visits, refine the application process, and begin to collect some of the best practices on how to meet the standards. I want to pause at this point to recognize and acknowledge the contribution that the hospitals that verified in the pilot program provided to the program. These are hospitals that helped us develop the program in terms of the application process, went through our visits, and ultimately ended up being verified as level 1 ACS children's surgery programs. And again, they're Lurie Hospital in Chicago, Children's Hospital Wisconsin, Duke, Texas Children's, and University of California, Davis. They made an immense contribution to our program by helping us through the pilot process. Where are we now with this program? We're in a very exciting phase. The application portal opened in January of 2017. We've had about 150 hospitals express interest in participating. There's 15 that are contracted and in the final formal phases of the application. We'll begin our first site visits as a part of the regular program on August 20th. And finally, Cliff gave me permission yesterday to give breaking news, which is not on CNN, so it's not controversial. But this is that we've made the decision that within the children's surgery program, we will host collaborative efforts within the children's surgery program, so that not only will we provide data back about where you are, but we'll coordinate efforts on how to get better. We feel that within children's surgery, it's a small enough community that it's best that it be based in a single place, and the most appropriate place is the college. We're going to begin with initial perioperative antibiotic prophylaxis stewardship project, and this is in the early developmental phases, so there's more to come. Watch for it when you're invited to join. We encourage you to join. I think it'll be an opportunity for all of us to learn the best way to most appropriately use antibiotics, and we'll learn from that then about how we will do subsequent collaboratives in children's surgery. Thank you for your time and attention. I'm happy to talk with people afterwards about the exciting things going on in children's surgery.
Thank you, Doug. On the other end of the age spectrum are the older adults. And this has been an important initiative for the American College of Surgeons just because of the burden and the numbers of patients in the age group. And I think that almost everyone in the room understands that, either in the professional life or in the personal life. So here to talk to us about the geriatric program is Dr. Ronnie Rosenthal. Ronnie is a professor of surgery at Yale and edits the leading textbook on geriatric surgery, is the head of the ACS Geriatric Surgery Task Force, is a co-PI on the funded geriatric surgical program, and is probably one of the most thoughtful people and proponents of taking care of older adults in the surgical realm. So please welcome Ronnie Rosenthal.
Thanks, everybody, and I do mean everybody. There are a lot of you out there. So it's my great pleasure to be here to talk to you today about the Coalition for Quality in Geriatric Surgery. And I just want to correct one thing that Dr. Barnhart said. He said that the pediatric program was the youngest sibling of adult NSQIP, but actually the geriatric program is still in gestation, so we really do beat them in terms of that. So I have two disclosures. One disclosure is that I do receive an honorarium from the grant, a small one, but even more importantly, I have a Medicare card, and so everything I tell you has to do really with myself. Now, you all know the population is aging, but I just want to remind you of the magnitude of this problem, or it's not a problem, it's good news. Starting in 2012, 10,000 people turn 65 every day. That's 1 every 8 seconds. And by 2030, 1 in 5 people will be over the age of 65. And what's even more astounding is by 2050, there will be 20 million of the oldest olds. That's people over the age of 85. And more than 50% of people over the age of 65 will have some kind of surgical procedure in the remainder of his or her life. Now, what's also interesting is that people are aging. It's, you know, you think if you live in the upper Midwest, you won't have to worry about this because everybody moves to Florida. But in fact, by 2030, the oldest people are going to be aging sort of in situ. They're going to be aging where they are. So Maine and the Midwest and many rural areas are going to have very high dense populations of older patients, up to 30% on this map. And what's more interesting is if you look at how surgical care is provided in the last year of life, and this was from a study that looked at a cohort of Medicare recipients who died in 2008. And in the last year of life, almost 32% of people had some kind of surgical procedure, and in the last month of life, almost 20%. But what's startling about this map is that if you look at the variation, it's almost a threefold variation because of location. So in Hawaii, only 11% of people get surgery in the last year of life, but in Indiana, in Indianapolis, Indiana, or in Gary, somewhere in Indiana, 35% of people get surgery in the last year of life. So there are other studies that indicate this has nothing to do with patient preferences for care in the end of life being different because of their location. So are the people in Hawaii getting all the care they need? And are the people in Indiana getting more care than they want? How do we know what's happening? So take, for example, Dr. Michael DeBakey, the famous surgeon, Dr. Michael DeBakey, who invented all of the surgery for repair of thoracic aortic dissections. On New Year's Eve of his 97th year, he had severe chest pain and diagnosed himself with a dissecting thoracic aneurysm. But because he was concerned that the surgery, the operation that he developed to repair this, might, at his age of 97, leave him mentally or physically crippled. I'd rather die, he said. And so he didn't go for surgery until, as he approached the end of life and went into coma in February, his family decided he would go to the operating room, sort of among this big ethical concern. So the idea that people might think there are things that are worse than death is not uncommon for older patients. And this is from a study that we quote quite often that looks at the treatment preferences for older adults, looking at if there was a likelihood of an adverse outcome. So for the first row, you see that there's a low burden treatment like antibiotics. If the result was return to your former health, then almost everybody would do that. For a high burden treatment like surgery, but the return to normal health is the outcome, 88 or 89% of people would still do that. But for low burden treatments, if the outcome is functional impairment, only a quarter of people would do it. And if the outcome was cognitive impairment, only 11% of people would do it. And in a more recent study that actually asked sick older patients what treatment outcomes would be worse than death, and I don't know if you can read these here, but I don't know if I can read these here. It says, bowel or bladder incontinence, relying on a breathing tube, difficulty getting out of bed and being confused all the time. More than 50% of people said that was worse than death. So ding, 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 we need to pay attention to this. This is a big problem, and we need to do something about it quickly. The other thing that we know is that age also has a negative impact on traditional surgical outcomes. So the top bar here is morbidity, and the bottom graph is mortality, and the increasing age is with increasing darkness of the bars. And then you can see the mortality and morbidity for older people goes up in colorectal surgery and hepatobiliary surgery, in almost all surgery. But when you look at the really big operations like lung resection, pancreatic resection, and esophagectomy, for an 80-year-old having a esophagectomy, the mortality is almost 20%. That's a really high mortality. But we also know that all 80-year-olds are not the same. So it wouldn't be New York if we didn't talk about the theater. So I want to just tell you about Angela Lansbury, who at age 89 last year, or 2015, won an Olivier Award for Best Supporting Actress in Blithe Spirits Playing on Stage in London. That same year, she toured the United States with that. Now, 89, that's pretty amazing. At age 80, she was not nearly as mobile or not nearly as able to do this sort of thing because she had terrible knee arthritis. But she had a total knee replacement, and she said, "I'm thrilled with knee replacement surgery," saying it allowed her to dance again. So could you imagine at 89 years old having the memory to be able to do a whole stage performance when I can't even remember what the next slide is going to be here. But there's a spectrum of older patients, and we know that there's also the frail older patient. And we say, oh, we recognize frailty when we see it, but this is what frailty really is. Now, I don't expect you to look at all the details on the slide at all. I just want you to know that frailty is complicated. It's characterized by chronic undernutrition and loss of lean muscle mass, and has a whole host of other inflammatory reactions involved with it. But it's complicated. And now, if you think about what the metabolic and inflammatory consequences of surgery are, again, you don't need to remember the details about this, but it's complicated. There are all kinds of counter-regulatory hormones and cytokines and all kinds of changes in the muscle and the fat and the liver. So it isn't surprising when frailty and surgery meet, you get this. What is this? I mean, it's really hard to figure out how to do the right thing for the frail older person. And it's not surprising that when we look at how frailty impacts surgery, that frail patients don't do as well. And if you look at, this is one of the most recent studies on the impact of frailty and surgical outcomes. And you can see that the orange dots at the bottom are post-discharge mortality, and the horizontal axis is increasing frailty by one of the frailty scores. And you can see how with increasing frailty, the post-discharge mortality goes up. But what's most striking is those open bars, the graph of the open bars, and that's readmission to the hospital. And that goes from less than 10% in people who aren't frail to over 40% in people who are very frail. So this is another one of these ding, 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 ding moments. We have to do something about this. We really have to figure out how to treat patients so that they don't wind up back in the hospital again. So what have we been doing for older patients? So over the last several years, starting with the release of the, I lost the screen. Okay. Starting with the release of the perioperative guidelines, the preoperative assessment guidelines in 2012, with a follow-up of the perioperative management guidelines in 2016, we put out for people what we think are the optimal way to treat older patients. What are the standard, guidelines for treating older patients? And then starting in 2014, we began the Geriatric Pilot, and I really do want to thank the people in Geriatric Pilot who started in 2014 thinking it was going to be a year, and who are still contributing 3 years later and doing a fabulous job of getting us data. We're over 40,000 patients now. So this began in 2014, 23 hospitals, patients 65 and older, and we had 16 variables that included 4 domains: healthcare goals, function, mobility, and cognition, and then 3 variables that looked at the 30-day functional outcome only in patients over age 80. Now, this has been a very helpful, this has given us very, very helpful data. This is the rate of delirium in patients according to age. And you can see that by age 85, which is the bars on the extreme right, over a quarter of the patients who are hospitalized for surgery wind up with an episode of delirium. And the patients who have delirium, and that's the bars in the red, have much worse outcomes. They have a much higher rate of being discharged to an institution, they have higher morbidity, and they have higher mortality. And the problem is each episode of delirium costs between $16,000 and $24,000. And if we think about that across the country, that's a potential burden of 38 to 152 billion, and 30% of delirium is preventable. So this is a huge burden that we really could do better at. So it's ding, ding, ding again, we need to do something different, and what we needed to do was develop a quality program to really be able to impact the care of older patients based on the same principles of set the standards, build the right infrastructure, collect the right data, and verify through third party. Where our program is different is that we were able to partner with the John A. Hartford Foundation, which is a foundation, a charitable foundation that has been working solely to improve healthcare in older patients since the 1980s, and has been working to do it in the surgical specialties since 1994. And with that, we developed the Coalition for Quality in Geriatric Surgery, which is the purpose of which is to systematically improve the surgical care of older adults by establishing a verifiable quality improvement program with standards based on evidence and focused on what matters most to the individual patients. And the other place where our program is different is we're not thinking of having like a tiered program with a level 1, level 2. We want this program to apply to everybody, all hospitals, to be any place, whether it's in the upper Midwest, it should apply to everybody. These are the program's goals: to engage our stakeholders. We realize that surgeons can't do this alone. It really does take a village, so the stakeholder piece is probably one of our most important pieces. We have 7 goals: to engage the stakeholders, set the standards, develop measures that matters to patients, develop the verification piece, and then to educate providers and pilot and launch the program. So these are our stakeholders quickly. We have patients and families represented, which we think is incredibly important. Advocacy and regulatory groups, we have CMS and AARP and the American Hospital Association working with us. We have healthcare professionals from other organizations, and then all of the surgical groups as well. What we did with our stakeholders was we engaged them, we had a big meeting, and we asked them what did they think was a problem with providing care to older patients today, and what did they think the ideal state should look like. We also developed our standards using previous literature reviews and adding to them, and then we went across the country and made 11 site visits to hospitals in various areas to find out what people were really doing in caring for older patients and what they saw as the barriers. We put that all together, and we came up with 308 preliminary standards, which our fellow Julia and Marsha McGorry-Russell worked on and published in the Annals of Surgery this year. And we realized that 308 standards is an enormous number of standards. So we did a consolidation down to 92, and then did a paper pilot where we sent the standards out to hospitals and asked them which ones they were already doing, and if they weren't doing, how difficult it would be to do them. And what we realized was the main thing is if we want 4,000 hospitals to do this, we need to make the burden light. And so we consolidated the standards to 33, and we're going to pilot these standards in 6 hospitals across the country starting in November, and we're going to concentrate on goals concordant with care, the preservation of cognition, and the maintenance of function. So these are our beta standards, with chapters on goals and decision-making, pre-op optimization, intra and immediate post-op care, and transitions of care. And we still have a little work to do. We still have to develop our educational pieces and our verification pieces, but we plan to launch the program with a quality summit in 2019. And if we could get John Glenn to the moon, not to the moon, if we could get him into space at age 77 and get him back safely, we certainly can get our patients through, and we hope that many of you, if not all of you, will be interested in participating in this when we launch it in 2019. Thank you.
Thank you, Ronnie. Next is Dr. John Morton. John is a professor of surgery at Stanford. John has been the past president of the ASMBS. John is a former Robert Wood Johnson scholar, and so he is very well versed in the methods of achieving quality. He, in fact, has a degree in quality, yes. And so please welcome Dr. John Morton.
Thank you. Well, thanks, Cliff. I think my biggest qualification is I'm an FOC, friend of Cliff. So I'll talk to you a little bit today about what we're doing in MBS AQUIP, and it's really remarkable to see the wide breadth of influence that surgery has. You've heard about the geriatric impact, pediatric, general surgery, And now I'll tell you a little bit about our bariatric population. Just to kind of review very quickly, why are we here in terms of our reason for being? We'll go through the structure of our program, accreditation, as well as some of our quality improvement efforts. Why is this important? Well, it's pervasive. You've seen slides already about how things affect us, but obesity is one that affects us tremendously, and the rate of growth has been phenomenal in a very short amount of time, as you can see there. The other thing that we've had more recognition of is not only the prevalence of obesity, but as well as the fact that it is a disease. It's not just a lifestyle choice. There is impact from it as well, and the AMA declared it as such. And if you look at it, if it's a disease like any other. And it's got stages of disease just like cancer, and you can see all those different ones arrayed there. And in this way, we can hopefully get some precision medicine applied to obesity by figuring out what works for folks. Why is it important to intervene? Because it affects every field of medicine, literally from head to toe. Diabetes, high blood pressure, sleep apnea, joint disease, even cancer. And I'll give you one more disease to think about, and that's the disease of surgical complications. If you think about it, if you put all of the complications associated with surgery, it could be a leading cause of morbidity, mortality in this country. And it doesn't matter what field you're in terms of surgery. If you have an obese patient, it raises your risk. I give you this one example here when it comes to obesity and joint disease that increases surgical site infection and revision rates. So why is surgery even part of the obesity equation? Well, I think in many ways we're kind of the first responders to this epidemic. Well before we had different things to approach different epidemics, we had surgery first. You know, before we had all the anti-neoplastics for cancer, surgeons were there first to see what they could do to help deal with cancer. So obesity is kind of the same way. We may not be able to treat every single patient, but at least we're going to focus attention on that patient and be able to treat them. Diet and exercise, you'll hear that from folks as well. Why doesn't that play a role? Well, if you've ever seen The Biggest Loser, you know that there's a lot to it, more to it than just willpower. This shows all those patients who were in The Biggest Loser, and if you look at them, every single one of them regained weight. The only one who did not was one that had bariatric surgery. And you can see there that one of the reasons for this, again, is not physiology, is not psychology, but physiology. And this is the hunger hormone that prompts us when to eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And you can see that when you diet, that ghrelin level goes up. So again, this is a better understanding of the disease that we're dealing with. Now, these are the different types of procedures that we do, and I know not everybody's familiar with them. The band is like putting a belt across the stomach, and you can cinch it up or loosen it as needed. The sleeve gastrectomy, you take the stomach about the size of a football, make it into a long skinny tube. Finally, the bypass, we make a very small stomach about the size of an egg and connect it to the intestine. And if you look here, where are we in terms of number of cases that we're doing in the types? And we do roughly about 200,000 cases a year. And you can see the majority of these cases are sleeves. Now, where is MBS AQIP in relationship to the rest of surgery? You heard that the college is over 100 years old. Well, we're pretty new to the block. As you can see here, we just started with accreditation back in 2006, and we've undergone a lot of evolution in a short period of time. And you can see here that we came out of necessity. CMS said you had to be accredited in order to do bariatric surgery. There were two programs, they are now united, and I'll share with you some of the milestones that we've had through MBS AQIP. I would be remiss if I did not thank two people that made this happen, and that's Dr. David Hoyt and Dr. Cliff Coe. They are really big parts of why we have an MBS AQIP program today, and I really want to thank them. MBS AQIP, as you can see, there is the only nationwide program that we have for bariatric surgery. 90% of hospitals performing bariatric surgery are MBS AQIP certified. And you can see here it's very much like NISQIP, where we have standards and we have registries, and we employ that in order to see what kind of quality improvement we can derive. And this just shows you very briefly some of the changes we've had over the years. In 2012, we started, and you can see there that we started out with creating our standards. We have a very involved group of surgeons and integrated health members. Over 1,000 comments were seen. The following year, we were able to get our standards implemented and move it forward. And finally, you see here in 2014, even further growth. We became one of the few QCDR programs in the country. And in 2015, we started our decreasing readmissions project that I'll share with you a little bit more in a moment. 2016 saw the issuance of a second standard, so we've gone through already 2 standards. And in 2017, 2018, we're proud to be a track here at this conference, as well as create our energy project that you'll hear more about. So if you look at the number of centers that are part of MBSA QIP, we have over 800. So Bruce, you need one more. We'll see if we can send one more out to you to get you over that 800 mark. And you can see there that we've got 750 MBSA QIP accredited centers, and we even have an international center with more to come. This is our staff, and of course I really want to thank Teresa Fraker and Amy Duraci for all of her help with leading this program. None of this would happen without their help, and they are very much involved and very much needed. This is our committee structure that I chair. I want to really thank, of course, our committee chairs, including Stacy Brethauer, Tony Petrick, as well as David Provost and Wayne English. Also want to thank all the ASMBS presidents that came before us that helped lay the groundwork for this, including Nin Nguyen, Jaime Ponce, Samar Matar, and Ronnie Rosenthal. So we came to MBSA QIP, as I mentioned to you before, out of necessity. And this was an editorial that Bruce Wolf and I authored in response to what we saw was an issue around bariatric surgery where we had very high mortality rates, up to almost 5%. And what we call for is the idea that we could maybe improve outcomes if they were at accredited centers. And this is what's resulted since. It's been a tremendous improvement in outcomes in a very short amount of time. It's declined almost by tenfold. In this study that we did, just looking at accredited versus unaccredited hospitals, what we found was less cost, less complication, and of course better outcomes. If you look at the collection of data around accreditation bariatric surgery, the vast preponderance of evidence supports accreditation. And what we can also see is that the insurance companies have also followed through in looking at accreditation as being very important in their processes. You can see that all the major insurers, Blue Cross, Aetna, United, all of them involve accreditation as a requirement. So if you want to look at where we are in bariatric surgery, what's kind of the state of outcome, you can see here that our 30-day mortality is about close to 1 out of 1,000 at 0.1. And you can see our leak rates for the sleeve and the bypass are all less than 1%. And we're getting close to being less than 1% overall for any sort of surgical site infection. So we're proud of those results, want to keep them going, want to see how we can improve. If you look at our improvements around data, we've done a few things and really want to thank Christopher Huffman, our statistician on this, as well as Matt Hutter, who headed up data for us. We became a QCDR for CMS a few years ago. And in addition to that, we also have our own public use file, again taking a page from NISQIP about how we can improve. Matt has also been instrumental in getting patient-reported outcomes as part of our database in the future with his PCORI grant, and we look forward to more outcomes coming from data. A new quality improvement project that Cliff mentioned and that Elizabeth will mention as well in just a moment is energy, which is enhanced recovery for our bariatric patients. Already length of stay is fairly short for our patients, but we believe by enhancing our current recovery methods, we can decrease nausea, we can decrease the use of opiates after surgery as well. And Stacy Brethauer, our current ASMBS president, heads up that effort for over 30 hospitals. I want to share with you probably what was our biggest achievement in the last couple of years, which was our DROP project that I had the privilege of leading, and it was around decreasing readmissions. And I think the one thing that we do know about readmissions for bariatric surgery is that many are preventable. They're around dietary indiscretions, eating too much too quickly, and from that we've learned that this is a potential area of intervention. This is one pilot that we looked at for readmissions, and it was done at Stanford as well as Geisinger, and some common sense solutions towards decreasing readmissions. And we're able to achieve a pretty significant readmission reduction in a short amount of time. We wanted to expand upon this one couple of pilots to doing it nationwide, and it was a pretty unique project. It was 128 hospitals that were represented. This is the largest readmission program that we've had, And the interesting thing about it is we never met in person. This was all accomplished through webinars, through phone calls, as well as a mentor process that we employed where the mentors were able to give their instruction through interaction with those centers. And really what the drop readmission bundle looked like was different components of processes, preoperatively, giving patient education, making sure they had their prescriptions before they left the office. Then while they were in the hospital, there was a roadmap that they employed. We also wanted to make sure that they got the appropriate dietary recommendations to prevent those readmissions. And then post-operatively, what was most important was around getting that phone call as soon as those patients were discharged. This is what one of the processes looked like. It was an educational video that highlighted the different processes of care from the nutritionist, from the nurse, from the psychologist, and even pharmacists, because medication reconciliation is quite important for our patients. They're also given a help card that you can see here. If there was an issue, they knew to call the clinic first before going to an ED. And here are some of the results that we saw through this project. And you can see here's a run chart that we employ, and you can see some pretty significant decline. And here you can see reductions in readmissions that were less than 24 hours, pretty significant, particularly for our sleeve patients. And the next slide just indicates how this works, how it takes some time to implement the change. But if you look at Q4 here, we were really cooking with gas. We were down by 27% in that quarter. So with the drop project, we were able to see some very significant reduction in readmissions. And that was one of the highlights of our MBSA QUIP program. So what's next? Well, we're looking to see other ways that we can help. We look at weight loss surgery as often being just, as the name implies, weight loss. But there's a lot more that goes into it. You can have improvements in your cardiac function. You can have improvements in your joint function. And really, we look at bariatric surgery potentially as being the ultimate in prehab for many patients who are undergoing surgical procedures. You're going to get control of blood pressure, you're going to get control of blood sugar, decrease weight, more mobility. So we're looking to hopefully extend some of these benefits to our surgical colleagues in hernia surgery, in transplant, where you can't list a patient for a transplant if their BMI is over 35. And we will, as I mentioned before, make use of all the good benefit that bariatric surgery can provide around decreasing diabetes and, of course, even mortality at 5 years. Next steps, too, include looking at obesity as a disease model where we can incorporate everything from lifestyle change all the way to even medications, kind of like adjuvant chemotherapy for our patients, and introducing endoscopic procedures that are kind of intermediate between surgery and medications. Much like you see in cancer centers, that's the idea for the future for us in bariatric surgery. And the reason it's necessary is because we need to get more people aware of some of the implications of carrying extra weight. A survey that was done just a few months ago indicated that obesity is a leading cause of concern for patients, but very few providers are talking to their patients about their weight. So I ask everybody to start that conversation with your patient, because there are options and there is hope for those patients when you have a lot of different options. I'll close with one thing, and I wouldn't be a weight loss surgeon if I didn't have a show and tell picture, and I restrained myself just to showing one. But I talked to you a little bit about how we can work together using bariatric surgery potentially as prehab and other fields of surgery as we improve. But don't forget the impact that surgery can have not only on your patients' lives, but in the families as well as in community at large. Here's husband and wife that were operated on the same day, and you can see them there with their kids, and here they are about a year later. And you can see what a tremendous change it meant to that family, and we hope to extend that benefit to as many families as possible. And how will we do it? We will do it through MBSA QUIP, where we have standards that are verified, we have registries where outcomes are reported, and outcomes that are worked upon through quality improvement, and hopefully we can provide more benefit down the road. It's really an honor and privilege to be here and being part of this great conference, and really again want to thank Dr. Coe and Dr. Hoyt for embracing MBSA QUIP. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. So I hope you're getting a sense of all the things that are ongoing in surgical quality from different ends of the spectrum of age and disease and all that. Our next speaker is going to add on to that. And so I don't know if there's a picture on me, but I don't know, can you read this? Are you enrolled in the Improving Surgical Care and Recovery Program? And so this is the program that I talked about earlier, ISCR. How many people here, with a show of hands, are doing some kind of enhanced recovery, fast tracking type of program at your hospital? So it looks about maybe a half. This is a program that Liza is going to tell you about. Liza Wieck is a faculty member at UCSF. She was just at Johns Hopkins. She's one of those people who could just go from Hopkins to UCSF to all these types of amazing places whenever she wants to. So she's faculty now at UCSF and is helping to run this program. She's going to tell you about the amazing work that enhanced recovery can achieve in both multidisciplinariness, because it's surgeons and anesthesia and nursing and pharmacy and C-suite and frontline providers, as well as the phases that it's going to work on. In the preoperative phase, where we see the patients in the clinic, in what we do in the operating room, what we do post-operatively in the hospital, and what we do post-discharge. So it's multidisciplinary and multiphasic. And so she's going to tell you about this program. So please welcome Liza Wieck.
Thank you. We're really excited about this new program, which is a partnership between the college, between Johns Hopkins Armstrong Institute for Quality and Safety, and AHRQ. And I just want to emphasize and thank AHRQ for partnering with us, and it's truly a partnership. They're actively helping and supporting us for this program. I have one disclosure, that I do receive salary support from AHRQ for helping to run this program. So when this idea came forward as a collaboration, the goals are set collaboratively between all those three parties. And the project goals are really, and I think this is important, to measurably improve patient outcomes in 5 surgical areas by increasing the implementation of enhanced recovery practices in hospitals through the use of an adaptation of the comprehensive unit-based safety program, which is an implementation framework for quality improvement that really focuses on the front line. And in addition, it was stated that it's anticipated to reduce healthcare utilization and improve the patient experience. But I think, and this is reiterated over and over again as we've worked on this program, really the primary purpose is to improve patient outcomes. We believe we'll reduce length of stay, but this is really about the patient outcomes. And so how are we going to get there? We're going to get there by coming up with a standardized way that we're delivering perioperative care from the moment we meet the patient and decide to have surgery all the way to discharge and onwards to home. Collectively, with a transdisciplinary collaboration at each hospital between surgeons, nurses, and anesthesiologists, we're going to help people develop pathways that then you can reduce variations. So you can anticipate that a patient who has surgery on Monday versus Wednesday has similar care, surgeon by surgeon X versus surgeon Y, similar care, really get at some of that variation. And the pillars that are involved in this that we're really focusing on are patient and family engagement, really thinking about how to partner with our patients and families to help have these things happen every time that we want to have happen, have the patients become advocates for getting the right care at the right time. Stressing early mobility and getting patients back to their functional status as soon as possible. Getting multimodal analgesia and state-of-the-art practices out to our patients every time, and really trying to cut back on our opioid use and post-discharge opioid prescribing. And then optimal nutrition, both on the front end, letting patients eat and drink up to a couple hours before surgery, getting those guidelines that have been out there for 5 and 10 years into practice. And then letting patients eat quickly after surgery if appropriate. And finally, importantly, for this project, we're really emphasizing getting out all the evidence-based practices, best practices for preventable harms for SSI, VTE, and UTI. And I think we're in a great position now because the guidelines have come out, we know the evidence, and we just need to get it into practice in a very standard way that we can reproduce every time with every patient. And I think this project is standing on great shoulders. There are many great projects that have come before us in the ARC safety portfolio. The projects that have come before us are the original ARC Safety Program for CLABSI, which was the CUS for CLABSI project, but some of you guys may have participated in your ICUs. And so we're really taking all the lessons learned from these projects before us and incorporated them into the framework of this program. I think one of the main lessons learned from the CLABSI program was this community is really essential, and learning from each other, and we have so much to share, and it's not just learning from the experts, you can learn from others. And that community also helps motivate us and show us what's possible. And declaring clear goals so we know at our hospital level and national level what we're trying to do. More recently, there was the ARC Safety Program for Surgery, or SUS, which some of you might have participated in as well, and I think what we learned from that is leadership is important, and who leads this work, and who has the skills and has the background to lead this work. And all of this work, I think as was mentioned before, needs surgeon engagement. It needs every other discipline's engagement, but it can't be done without surgeons. So we're really trying to think about how to make this program meaningful for surgeons and maintain that engagement. And then the lessons learned from ACS NSQIP and the value of high quality data. So we have a model of a framework for implementation that's drawing on all those previous projects and the framework of the Comprehensive Unit-Based Safety Program. And we believe that there's a partnership between senior leaders who are essential, and this work needs to align with their goals, and enhanced recovery and reducing complications, length of stay, readmission really resonates. So it's really easy for us to communicate that to our senior leaders. We're going to support coordination teams, transdisciplinary coordination teams with surgeons, anesthesiologists, nurses, who can span the whole continuum of care and address from the beginning to the end. And then really engage frontline staff and help people and get this message out to everyone who touches patients. And again, the patient's at the center. We're going to help teams declare clear goals for both their senior executives and frontline, have that enabling infrastructure, engage and connect, and have accountability for your performance. So the participation is open to anyone in the U.S. and Puerto Rico, District of Columbia. It's organized by surgical area, because we know that community is so important, and we learn from others who are like us. So the colon surgeons want to learn from the colon surgeons, and then we're going to do orthopedics, hips and knees and hip fracture following that, emergency general surgery, bariatrics, followed by gynecology, and the dates are up there. So we're enrolling colorectal hospitals that are interested in working in this area in colorectal surgery right now. You can participate in one or more cohorts. You can skip around just for the ones that are interest to you or where you have significant patient volume. Each cohort will last 12 months, so you'll participate for a period of 12 months. I think really importantly, because of our partnership with AHRQ, there's no fee to participate. This is open to hospitals that are participating in ACS NSQIP and those who don't. And everyone's going to see the same program with no fee. There are a series of tools and other things available as part of the program. There are clinical tools to help you get the evidence to your patient in a very structured way to try to make this more efficient. There were evidence reviews done by experts from around the country that really led to the development of a pathway. There's an implementation guide to talk about how you do all of this work. E-learning modules developed by the instructional designers at the ACS to help with this local adaptation, because we recognize that this pathway isn't going to look the same everywhere. There are pharmacy and P&T restrictions, there are resource skills. This requires local adaptation to be sustained, and we're going to help folks do that local adaptation. Patient education materials, again, the patient's an essential partner. Checklists, example order sets, tips for how to communicate with your health IT folks, posters, all of that's available. And then, because it is on the framework of the Comprehensive Unit-Based Safety System, there are other things to help with that senior executive partnership, frontline engagement, culture, teamwork. There's a return on investment calculator, ideas for sustaining the work, how to partner better with your senior executive, how to communicate your successes and your barriers, and declaring goals. I just wanted to highlight two things, the implementation guide and the pathway, because I think they're a new approach that we haven't used before and so much in surgery, and they're very prescriptive. It's taken back from a lot of feedback from all the folks in the audience that people want very detailed help about what to do next and how to structure this work. So there's a whole implementation guide that runs through every month of your 12-month participation, what you should be doing, what you should be anticipating for the next month, where you should be, what to do if you're not there, and very, very well spelled out. And then the pathway, similarly, again, it was built off of the evidence reviews, which were redone for this, and they include, in addition to all the enhanced recovery best practices, it includes all those best practices for the harm prevention. And we're at a great spot because lots of guidelines and recommendations have come out in the past year. So the evidence is there, we just need to get it out. And with the pathway, there has a worksheet accompanying it that clearly spells out how you would do, the options for doing each step, recognizing that this is going to look different at each hospital, but we tried to pull it all together in one space. So when you have those transdisciplinary meetings where you're meeting to try to come up with your pathway, and you have the surgeon, the anesthesiologist, the nurses, you can sit there with one tool that has all the options and really try to make some of these decisions more efficiently. We recognize that all of this is hard work, and a combination of the community and one-on-one assistance is going to be required to make it successful. So through the ACS, there's going to be implementation support from a nurse, Deb Hobson, who has a lot of experience in quality improvement over the years. She's available for consultation, and she's orienting with all of the hospitals who are going to participate. ACS clinical support will be available for both the existing NSQIP hospitals, the non-NSQIP hospitals. They'll support all the variables related to this program. Then, of course, the national project team is available at any time. Everyone's available via email and telephone. Really, the goal is to have a great collaboration, accessible resources. Again, from the lessons learned from some of those early projects, we recognize the value of the community. I think that's one of the reasons why there's 1,900 people here this year. You know, over the years, this meeting's just grown because that community of folks who have similar interests in all that we can learn from each other. So we recognize that, and as part of this program, there are coaching calls to build those community and learn from each other, and chances to share your documents and share things that worked and didn't work. National leader calls, not everything fits into the guidelines. There are things that are still controversial. One thing that wherever I've worked has been controversial is this perioperative glucose management. So Patch is passionate about glucose, is going to share his expertise and help field questions on that area, something that just didn't fit into one of those boxes. And there are other examples from people in the room who are going to be able to share their expertise with hospitals around the country. And then again, we copied John Morton and Teresa from the MBSA QIP, and we're going to have Ask ISCR calls, again, a different structure for getting help. And unique to this, and what ARC hasn't done since the original CLABSI project, is there's funding for face-to-face training sessions, so a chance for participating hospitals to come together for 3/4 of a day and learn about this, learn about ERAS, learn about the program, and the goal of it is really to provide some of that change management and leadership training that's been so missing in the past. And we're fortunate to have partnered with the Applied Physics Laboratory, so it's a simulation-based training, really aiming at understanding your stakeholder perspectives, how to communicate the urgency for change, developing that value case, team development, how to foster team interactions, prioritization of resources. I think, measurement and evaluation of the program is always an important aspect. And so building on the experience of ACS NSQIP, we developed a performance measurement system to see how we're doing at each hospital and how we did collectively as a group. It's built on a combination of process measures, outcome measures. Outcome measures are surgical site infection, VTE, UTI, and ARC just wanted to make sure we didn't increase the mortality in the US. And utilization, length of stay and readmission. And then actually we were asked to measure patient experience. We have a partner who is Westat, a CAPS contractor who's going to measure patient experience on behalf of hospitals for a subset of patients in collaboration with the college. We hear that we've heard the request. Reports are essential to drive improvement. Reports will be available to all hospitals for process measure, outcome measures, to really help you get this data back to the front line, get the data to your senior executives so you can get that help that you need locally to address the barriers and see successes. And again, all of this is available whether you're an ACS NSQIP hospital or not with an existing subscription. If you're an ACS NSQIP hospital, it's all integrated would all be integrated into your registry. You don't need to go anywhere different. If you're a non-NSQIP hospital, it'll be available through a little mini NSQIP Lite type of registry. So who should participate? We think this is good for patients, for our hospitals who have no prior ERAS implementation experience, who've tried to implement it but don't feel like they've gotten all the benefits that they wanted, and those who have good programs and are happy but want to learn from others and share their expertise. Other group that we've seen a lot of interest from is health systems and collaboratives that want projects that they can do across the system to reduce variation. And some of them are partially in NSQIP, so this is a chance to do something across your health system and have a common data collection platform. We've got a lot of endorsements from other societies like Ronnie and the geriatric folks, and I think, obviously the ACS is endorsing this. AHRQ is endorsing this, and the ASA is endorsing this and strongly encouraging their anesthesiologists to participate with us, that they totally agree with our mission. The patients really, this is the right thing to do for our patients. A couple quotes from patients who have been treated in enhanced recovery programs about how wonderful their experience was, the pain management and stress was really mitigated. Every phase of my care was well coordinated, contributing to a pleasant hospital experience. So really getting everyone together, functioning clear direction, clear pathway is the way to have well coordinated, good patient-centered care. And this program is going to give you the tools, the prescriptive approach, and the support you need to get there. So I think, just as our team reflects on where we can go over the next couple years, or at least in this year in colorectal surgery, can we improve that relationship between frontline staff and senior executives? Can we all partner on something that's mutually important to both of us? And that relationship can then tie into future things. Will we see consistent and clear bowel prep recommendations for colorectal surgery? Could you have one bowel prep at a hospital instead of 5? Will we see family members partnering with care teams to help with the mobility of their loved ones? When you know what to expect, are they ready and they're ready, able to walk them afterwards to try to shift the burden of care? Can we have transdisciplinary collaboration between the anesthesiologists, bring more joy to our work, and really help address some of the burnout and other underlying themes we hear today? Can we get consistent prescribing of non-narcotic analgesics, get every patient to get Tylenol and ibuprofen before they get a narcotic? Can we not have any missed VTE doses because of epidural pulls and other things like that, or confusion? And can we get patients back to work more quickly, functioning the way they want more quickly? SSI rates of less than 5%. There was a paper in JACS from Barnes Jewish that had an SSI rate of 2% for all their patients that got the right bowel prep. So can more of us have SSI rates like that? Can we get feedback to all our disciplines? Can we get these NSQIP reports and performance reports back to surgeons, nurses, anesthesiologists, senior leaders? Can we get opioid-free analgesia in the OR? And so we think together we can do that over the next year. And we really invite all of you to think about partnering us. We think it's a really exciting new program. There's a table outside here. You can sign up on site. Stacy McSwine is here, ready to sign you up. It's just a very simple hospital participation agreement. Colorectal surgeries right now, and then orthopedics will be this fall. That's our email address. Any questions? So we look forward to working together.
Thank you, Liza. Our final speaker of this session is Dr. Hoyt. As we were writing the quality manual, we heard over and over again how teamwork is so important. And part of teamwork are the individual team members and the individual person's responsibility and accountability. And a number of surgeons have approached the college over the many past years and asked to have a way of having their own accountability and responsibility. And so the surgeon-specific registry was developed in large part for that. To talk about the surgeon-specific registry is Dr. Hoyt. Please welcome Dr. Hoyt.
Thanks, Cliff. This is really a remarkable session if you think about it. And two thoughts come to mind. One, wouldn't it be interesting if our Congress was listening to the last hour? Amazing. The second is take yourself back to the 15th century. I'm not sure the forum, whether it was a hotel or the court, but you just heard presentations that would be the equivalent of Amerigo Vespucci, Christopher Columbus, Juan Cabrillo, sort of describing where we're going. That would then have to make Cliff the emperor, and I had to find one that would fit, and Philip the Handsome seemed to come to mind. All right, I'm going to talk a little bit about a project that's relatively new, and in a way it's one of the oldest things we've been working on. Dr. Codman had a vision 100 years ago that a surgeon should keep track of their results and use that for a variety of reasons, and I think we're finally getting to the point of accepting that as a responsibility. You've seen this diagram, and we're trying to bring all of our registry and data collection efforts together. But in particular at the bottom there, you see arrows feeding the SSR. And that's by design, because we all know that one of the biggest barriers to all of this effort is to get data out of the electronic health record, limit the amount of manual extraction, get to patient-reported outcomes, get financial data so we can truly judge value, and when appropriate, use claims data as well. And then we have the outputs that are typical, but what's driving this in particular is the box at the bottom. And the individual surgeon has got to have a data source that is going to allow them to individually improve, tailor that to their practice as that evolves over 40 years. They're going to be held to a standard that requires quality measurement for payment. We're in the middle of that now, and we'll show you how we're addressing that. Privileging and just initial credentialing, but privileging is going to be dependent upon that, and reprivileging. Maintenance of licensure or maintenance of certification, whatever that term changes to, and then finally public transparency. So we've got all of these needs that are real, and we've developed this ACS surgeon-specific registry to try and accommodate these needs. Now it's in this overall diagram, and Cliff has alluded to this. As we step back and looked at the way things were coming along linearly, we realized that we really, to go forward, since vasculars now come forward, complex GIs come forward, we even had preliminary discussions with thoracic about thoracic cancer, that we're going to have more and more programs, but we really needed to have an umbrella to get all these under. So that's what led to the development of the quality manual, and that's now done. And in doing that, we had to actually define the scope of responsibility for surgery. And although it's intuitive and implicit, particularly those that were trained 30 or 40 years ago, increasingly as we've gone to teams, we've run the risk of losing sight of the fact that we have responsibility for all 5 phases of care. So we defined the 5 phases of care so we could, in fact, then assure that we are addressing those. And the surgeon-specific registry is specifically pointed toward collecting data across preoperative readiness, immediate preoperative readiness, intraoperative, postoperative, and post-discharge. And it's preliminarily at that level. We've just heard the status of Strong for Surgery, the children's program, the geriatric program, and the ACS Improving Surgical Recovery Program. Those are generic across all of surgery, and then we've got the individual programs. So as a way to bring all this together for the individual surgeon as your practice changes, that's really the vision of the surgeon-specific registry. Now, it's not new. It was started several years ago, even under Tom Russell's leadership. As the case log, we changed the name, and we have, in the last year, completely redesigned this. And I'm going to just take you through so you can be familiar with it, show you how we're going to address this for the new government payment program under MACRA, so-called MIPS. And then we're going to be using the same kind of educational opportunity to expose you as you actually start to use it. There have been some rough starting with a completely new platform. And one of the most important things, and particularly I'd like to say to the surgeons in the room, is that we have deep, deep experience in the college in registries and managing data. We have a relatively limited amount with the surgeon specifically using that at the point of care or entering the data. So one of the things we've learned in this transition is it's very, very important to try and anticipate how a registry of this type supports the actual workflow of a surgeon, what they're using for, in addition to simply benchmarking themselves against aggregate data. And we've created a very robust effort in the last 3 months as this is rolled out with some problems, and we're slowly fixing each and every one of those. So please, if you have used it and you're having problems with it or you have some concerns, communicate with us so that we can make this better and better. So here's what you come to if you register, and you basically sign on and get a password and sign in. And when you do, this is what comes up. And on the left side is your menu, and we're going to go through a few of these features. In the middle and center is your patient care list, which is got on the left side action buttons, then the name, rank, and serial number, the operation, and then the status of the data so you can keep track of this. And then this compiles this in the lower left corner there. It tells you the number of cases you have in the database, et cetera. So this is your front screen, your summary screen. If you blow up the menu a little bit, what you see is you've got your cases, and that's where you view, enter, or edit cases. You can upload, so if you have in your workflow, your office, or in your practice, or in your clinic, you have somebody else entering or creating a spreadsheet that has all the patients you're going to operate on this next week, and you don't want to have to hand enter those themselves. This can be uploaded very easily. Somebody else can pre-populate this for you, and so that you have the essential grid available to you. Similarly, you can download data. So if you wanted to create a list of patients that were 30 days out, so you could assure at that time whether or not they had a complication and then enter the data, you can do the same thing. Ultimately, this will be pre-filled with databases that you're participating in. If you're a trauma surgeon, TQIP, if you're a bariatric surgeon, the bariatric database, NISQIP, et cetera. The problem is that many of these use a sampling methodology that will not give you all of your cases. So that to participate in the government programs or in the kind of thing that you might want for your own quality improvement, you're going to have to be able to have different options for data entry. Form management is a place where you can go and create custom fields so that if you wanted to get together with a group of colleagues and study something and add some data points to collect, that's very possible to do and very easy to do. Notifications are simply messaging that comes from either the college or the vendor, et cetera, to tell you how to do things as they're new or updates as they're changed. Analytics is really the section where the operational reports, and I'll show you again some prototypes that we have and how you can use these to be more specific about your analysis. But this is the area of the surgeon-specific registry that is the least developed. And we're now wanting to get input, and particularly if surgeons are interested in this, please come forward and we'll put you on our user group. The library has a set of tools and also some things that you'll need for signing up, for instance, to participate in the MIPS program. The risk calculator is simply a direct access to the website that hosts that, so you can, at the point of care, as you're working with a patient and entering data, or if you do this immediately later and you want to be able to demonstrate to the patient their actual risk, you can do that. We're planning on ultimately building some guidelines into this as well. And then finally, information about your account. So it's pretty straightforward and pretty simple. I would recommend you go and get on it. If you're a fellow, it's free. And at this point, you can get on and start to play with it. Now, just a few details about what you can do as you enter a case. So you have hit the action button, and that's what drops down. You can see you can print the form, you can view it, you can add data, et cetera. You can move the headers around if you like the way to display it differently. And down at the bottom there, you can see the actual number of cases. So to add a case, you'd hit Add Now. That will then allow you to, I'm sorry, those two slides are just about search features that you can use to display it. So here's adding a case. So if you add a case, you place a date in there. If it's the date of actual surgery, that's what will come up. If you wanted to preload this, so if you wanted to have yourself or an assistant preload this for next week's cases so that you could just enter what you actually did at the time, you can do that. You'd have to change the actual date of surgery then, because it'll put today's date in there. But you can start the case so you have it loaded and on your phone or iPad or however you're accessing this. That then can be basically saved. This is what comes up. And this is the first screen of the so-called short form. There will be a longer and then an intermediate form of this. The short form was designed to get the minimum amount of data you need to participate in the government programs for payment, et cetera. And everybody's going to have a slightly different need. So we're trying to create that flexibility. But the short form is what's available now. The longer form is coming up imminently. This is would bring this up. At the top there, you see some typing that says this case should be considered for MIPS 2017 participation. So if you want this to be used for your participation, then you will be able to be prodded at the time that you start the case, and you can enter that so that then as the data is delivered in the first quarter of 2018, you will have already picked the cases that you want to go forward. So again, here's name, rank, and serial number. That's what it looks like filled in. Here's the next form, which is some preoperative diagnostic information. And again, pick lists and pull downs. These so-called hot lists are like an Amazon learning engine. They will slowly learn what you most commonly do so that those diagnoses or problems will go to the top of the list and slowly increase the efficiency as you enter data. Again, something as simple as BMI, originally in the original release version, required you to enter weight and height, and now many people have that so commonly that you can enter it directly. Similarly, you can override the date, so if you pre-populated it for next week's surgery, then on Wednesday you can change it to the correct date so that it's in fact ready to go on that day. And again, here are the diagnostics, or the adjuncts rather, to the actual operation, the so-called CPT modifiers, which you can use this then for billing or however you're using it, and just some other screens. Now, this last one is really important in terms of, this is post-op occurrences, and this is going to change and expand over time. So we're going to increasingly add complication. Similar to NISQIP, you can add notes directly there. And then this one is really important as well. So if you want to collect data because of your own interest, or you, again, have in your practice several colleagues that you want to work together and collect similar data, you can add a field, and it's very easy to do so. Now, when you save, this takes you back to this screen then, and just to go down again to the notifications screen, this is the kind of resource that's in there. It tells you information, it gives you instructions, etc., and it's basically a resource center for you using the actual registry. You can upload multiple cases. I talked about that. Again, you access how to do that, the methodology and the forms, so you can hand these to your assistant from this same field area. And this just shows you actually going through that process. Now, the risk calculator, you've seen that, but you can access this directly through this registry. It obviously requires an internet connection. And we are considering building an app. If the previous registry had one built for Apple iPhone, and if there is sufficient interest in doing that, the software industry, as you know, is going to so-called responsive design, so that once you have a database, you can deploy it then, and the geography changes depending on whether you're on an iPhone, an iPad, or a regular screen. And if it's quick enough and you have reliable internet access, then you may not have as much need for an app. But we're going to look at that very carefully over the next few weeks and work with our user group to decide that. We've identified a vendor that could do it, and that's at this point in the plans. The risk calculator, again, is accessed and performed in the exact same way that you do now. And why is something like this in there? Because we believe that if you do this, as has been already been said for several times, that that's good care or best care. And you can document by having done it that should then get credit for that. If a payment program has expectations of performing some function that's thought to be good, like doing risk calculation or doing an adequate consent process that we can agree upon, then you will have data being collected on you, which then can be submitted and enhance your payments. So this is all thought through by design to give you credit for something you're really already doing for your patients. Now the reports, again, this is the newest. We are talking about this conceptually in terms of enhancements we can do, and we would very much welcome input from you. There will be a table here throughout the meeting where some of our staff that have been working on this will be available to you to give your ideas for reports, etc. You access this. This is the standard report, so it's simply a spreadsheet of your cases. You can look at it procedure by date, procedure frequency, etc. And you can tab through those various displays of this. Over on the left gives you a set of tools that you can specify filters, so either types of cases or time window, etc., can all be determined with slide bars or simply checklists and change your own data. If you want to go down to an individual case, there is the form on the right there you can see, and you simply click on that and it brings you right back to that individual case. Similarly, if you wanted to, so that's just showing modifying a filter. Here's an example of a procedures frequency report. So if you wanted to click on that one, on cholecystectomy, then in the right lower quadrant there of the slide, it will pop up with those cases in that, and then you can go to an individual case. So these are designed to be the kinds of things you might be interested in, but again, we're looking for ideas, particularly as we consider benchmarking reports that will help you have what you want. Here's another way to look at it. This is patient attributes, so frequency, for instance, what their age is, what their BMI is, etc. And again, if you click on the bar, you then get the same kind of opening of what's in that bar, and you can look at a particular case or all the cases individually. I think, if nothing else, as we all use this kind of data, it's going to get you much more sophisticated just about some of the details of your own practice. But that in turn will then lead to you wanting more things. And that's where, just like with NSQIP or bariatric surgery or any of the other databases, we need to get your feedback as you start to use this. Wound classification, another example, if you wanted to see what were your 4 contaminated cases, there you go, right there in front of you. Post-op occurrences, again, this is pretty preliminary now in terms of mortality and routine morbidity, but this will change over time, and the more you can tell us what you want, the better we will have. And we will then be able to start providing benchmark reports so you can use them just like you do NSQIP to look at yourself in isolation. I think, you know, we're kind of running out of time, and I'll just introduce you to the last feature of this that's built into the registry. And one of the reasons we've pushed very quickly and very hard on this and actually accelerated this ahead of some of the other projects is because of the law that has now come out of MACRA. MACRA is 2 pieces. It's participating in alternative payment initiatives, which are coming. The college is leading the way in that, but those are several years out. So most surgeons to participate in the adjustments that will be available in 2019 will be participating in the MIPS program. The MIPS program has 4 components: a quality component that was formerly PQRS, what's called the Advancing Care Information component, which was previously called EHR, Meaningful Use, cost, which is ultimately going to be something that people want, resource use. Right now, Medicare and CMS have decided that they do not have adequate data, so that will not affect your performance in 17, and I doubt even in 18. Clinical performance improvement, though, is a new category, and you're going to have a way to collect data on that if you want to participate in this. So we've built that into the registry as well. So quality and clinical practice performance activities can all be developed and collected during this year using this tool. And again, the percentage of that is going to be approximately 75%. So if you're going to participate in the program, and for the first year, if you know anything about this, it's basically paced so that the minimum to avoid a penalty is essentially to submit one case. I think most people are going to want to do that. So how does this actually work with this registry then? So you go into forms management, because to do this, you've got to first of all sign up for the program, and you click on the clinical forms through the form management, and then go through the steps of basically saying you want to participate. You've got to enter your approval or your consent. You've got to enter your provider number and your tax ID number. All that's available right through the registry to you to sign up. You then have to pick the measure sets that you want to participate in. And right now, many of these are pretty straightforward. You get a lot of credit just for participating in a registry, for instance. There's several others. We can't cover all that today, but we've got staff that are ready and able to take you through that. We spent a lot of time the last year trying to describe these programs through many publications, but this is now embedded in the fabric of this registry, and it should be pretty easy for you to participate. You have to decide how long you want to participate. If you wanted to offer a full years of data, that's possible, and then you could actually compete for the upside, or even just do something in between, which is 90 days of reporting. So all three options are available to you, and you're just going to have to decide which one you want to do. You also need to participate or pick what the improvement activities you want to participate in. And the law currently has about 90 or so different activities. And again, many of these are pretty straightforward, like participating in a registry, et cetera, and the methodology for picking those and then attributing your cases so that when your cases are submitted and your actual ratios are submitted, all that will be relatively automatic. And I'm just going to skip through that because that's detail that's beyond today. How do you add a case? Same kind of methodology. Once you set this up, then those fields will be driven to you as you enter a case, and you'll be able to first of all, click on this box, which I talked about before. Is this case relevant for MIPS participation? You can click it, and then those outcome measures will come up, and you can add the data for that particular case. I think, just to keep on time here, that's really what we wanted to cover for you. This is a new project. It's pointed at the individual surgeon much more than the program. There are going to be some growing challenges as we go through it, but I think we've adopted, from April till just now, we've changed it tremendously. We currently have about 170,000 cases in it, so there are a lot of surgeons that are using it, well over 3,000, and although there continue to be some issues that we're trying to improve, I think we've got a very useful product to you. But again, if you're having problems or you want to see it go in a particular direction, we'd really appreciate some feedback. Thank you very much, Cliff.
Thank you, Dr. Hoyt. So I think for the audience, most of you, I think, do not use the surgeon-specific registry, but I think there are two things that you could take from that piece. Number one, it is the first thing we're putting onto the platform, so it will help inform us of when other things, the programs that you are probably in, go onto the platform. So that's the first thing. The second thing is to recognize that surgeons have to participate in a lot of regulatory things probably outside of our program. And a lot of the necessity of the surgeon-specific registry addresses these types of things for the surgeons. And there's other specialties who want to come into the surgeon-specific registry, but for now it's for the surgeons. So while we are doing children's and bariatrics and NSQIP and all of these other things, we all need to remember and recognize that surgeons are having to do other things for quote-unquote quality and regulatory things. And so I think that you get a good idea of the things that that we, at least the college, is developing to help surgeons participate in those things. And so recognizing what the universe of quality and reporting is. We ran over a little bit. We're going to take a break, and we're going to start the next session, Hot Topics, at 4 o'clock, where we'll talk about opiates and diversity and PROs and other things. So thank you very much. We'll reconvene at 4 o'clock.